Chronicles of Ilu, They Came from the Sea. Chapter 1, Commander Eze. "It shall be very easy," General Mba said with a confident grin while drawing smoke from the thick-wrapped Ani leaf between his fingers. The smug smile made me cringe inwardly. This was my superior, the leader of the regiment. Yet here he was, overconfident before such a mission, high within the embrace of the sour-smelling green plant. It was a disgrace. Any idea what these things want with Adimian youngsters? I asked, trying to distract myself from the annoying, arrogant lip curl that seemed to always be under my general's mustache. The question was met with a collective chuckle from the regiment, to which I immediately reacted with a sharp stare to my underlings. I may have been ordered to deal with General's antics, but I was the second in command. My stare was enough to make the others quickly wipe the grins from their faces and fall in line. General Mba touched the armored plating on my shoulder, an untamed fire radiating from his chi as it often did. "Dear Commander," he smiled. Though this untamed fire coming from within the general always raged, his chi was actually much calmer than usual. The Ani my superior smoked had that effect on him. "We are guardians of Adim, soldiers of the great king Dubisi, and under the direct orders of the Sarkin of Messina. We are to trade these youngsters to whomever or whatever resides in that strange ship across the way for slaves of their own, for which we will be handsomely rewarded when we return home. That is all." A warm smile stretched across the general's face. I tried my best to hide my disgust from the violently brutal and sex-crazed man that was General Mba. I had been under his leadership for some time now, enough to sense through his inner radiance, the life force which all sun manipulators could sense, and although it was always turbulent, if I paid close enough attention, I could sense what he felt deep beneath his ever-violent and sexual urges. He housed agitation toward my curiosity. Although this curiosity was warranted, given the rumors, the thought of finally being free from the suffocating and infectious grip of the general outweighed my willingness to push the matter any further. "Well, sir, it is uncustomary to keep our guests waiting," I said, smiling back, to which General Mba smiled and patted me on my shoulder. His chi, however, did not house warmth for me. "Nzonga and Takul, retrieve the slaves from their quarters. Let us do this hastily. I wish to be in the sweet company of my concubines tonight before setting off tomorrow." "Yes, sir." The regiment's lowest ranked obliged before quickly following their orders. I made my way to the outer deck of the ship from the hull. The cycle of the 3 suns had ended recently, leaving only one sun in the clear skies as the cool air brought a chill to my perspiring skin. The water was calm, but that strange ship we headed toward in the distance brought unease to the pit of my stomach. It was bulbous and shapeless. It did not have a commanding presence like an Adimian ship that had structure and weight, but rather it sat atop the water as if merely floating along like a bubble. "A curious-looking thing, isn't it?" General Mba said, approaching from behind. "Indeed, sir." My eyes stayed fixed on it. I had command of water, but certainly not to the same degree as my sun manipulation, and as such could not make use of my water-sensing abilities. I wanted desperately to know what materials that ship was composed of. It had no recognizable radiation that my sun manipulation could make sense of. "Worry not, Commander," the general said, his voice sounding nearly jeerful. "Something so soft could easily be destroyed by our lowest-ranking member." I did not answer. The general's overconfidence throughout the entirety of this campaign in the East was infuriating. The islands of Iko had been conquered, and the general had been living like a king, fully enjoying the spoils of war to this point. But this secret dealing was an unknown variable. Such pride could be dangerous for something so unknown. Nzonga and Takul emerged from the lower decks of the ship with the slaves. There was only a single loose metal harness that jingled around their stomachs, bondage any capable manipulator could break free of. They were young, and almost all of their radiation carried fear and shame. Although there were 2 distinct radiations that emitted resolution, along with a special type of powerful vibration only a tested soldier could emit. General Mba chuckled, again placing a hand on my shoulder before I could investigate any further. "Worry not, Commander. If these curious beings are indeed hostile, they will be snuffed out by some of the finest spies of King Ndubisi's private guard. Spies, curious indeed, I thought. The strange ship was far larger than I had initially thought. In the distance it appeared so unassuming, but as the ship's navigator brought us closer, the full scope of the bulbous structure was on full display. It was incredibly smooth, not containing anything that could be identified as an outer deck, lower deck, or even doors. Just a perfectly round reddish circle, so smooth in fact the shimmer of the calm waters reflected off it, adding a blue hue to its reddish color. "Can you sense that, Commander?" Kier asked in a low whisper. Kier was one of the soldiers of the regiment who had command of water. I raised an eyebrow, encouraging him to go on. "I sensed it earlier. That ship, it contains what water manipulators refer to as an inner wave. It is as if that ship is alive." I turned back toward the ship. How could something so lifeless be alive? Kier could be trusted. He was a more than capable water manipulator. Where sun manipulators like myself could sense the external chi as a radiation, water manipulators can sense the internal chi like a wave, a technique I used myself in tandem with my sun manipulation. A grumbling came from the giant, smooth structure which shook the water, causing small waves. It was as if someone yielding a giant ram's horn had sounded an alarm. Wrinkles on the ship began to form. With it came a strong gust of wind that made me squint. The ship that had once been smooth now contained ridges throughout when I opened my eyes. The surface of the massive floating structure that had looked so easily burstable had now hardened to a material so dense it looked as if it could rival the metal ship of my regiment. The grave feeling from earlier befell me once again, but I was not the only one. Many throughout the ship emitted the same radiation. Even the general, unbothered as he usually is, radiated a faint fear deep from within from his chi. Another sound came from the hardened red ship. A buzz, unlike the one earlier that was reminiscent of a ram's horn, came from deep within the strange ship. I grasped the handle of my sheath-long blade as the buzz got louder. A chamber atop the giant ship widened. "Formations," General Ba cautiously ordered. I allowed the sun's embrace to power my body, floating behind the formation. The sun's embrace heightened my hearing. The buzzing coming from the ship was getting louder, and I sensed what was causing it. Insect wings? With such force? Another soldier of the regiment, who could command the sun, said. I had sensed it too. The way the air buzzed from the ship was identical to an insect's flapping wings. The radiation was indeed the same, but only on a much larger scale, as if the wings were giant. My suspicions were confirmed when witnessing what emerged from the hull of the giant ship. Spouting out like water from a blowhole, dozens of flying insects, each massive in stature, emerged from the opening. Something so large should not have been capable of flight. The sun reflected its sheen off the creature's shiny carapace as they flew down toward us. "Hold!" the general ordered. The creatures flew overhead and surrounded the entire ship, creating a buzzing tunnel that was deafening. They were just as tall, if not taller, than a house of a highly decorated guardian. The tallest member of the regiment would hardly come up to the abdomen of the massive things. Toward the stern of the vessel, there were 3 of the creatures, 2 carrying one in the middle, which appeared to be flightless. It was noticeably different from the rest. Its carapace was lighter and did not reflect the sun as the others did. Where the others were reminiscent of a mantis, this one, a lizard. Its eyes flickered to something similar to a chameleon. My spine quivered when sensing them land on the deck. My earth manipulation inherently sensed 2 distinct vibrations, shot from the multitudes of spiky legs that were identical to an arthropod, and another vibration that seemed to have similar musculature to a frog. I maintained my lock on the creatures. The 2 that could fly were certainly different from the one which they carried. They had 3 spiky legs on either side of their lower abdomen that tapped along the floor, rattling the entire outer deck. Their carapace exuded and took in air from various small holes throughout, making the creatures sound like they were panting. Their brownish, smooth carapace appeared metallic in nature, reflecting the sun. A long pair of sharp, hooked talons hung from their upper abdomen like a mantis. Oddly enough, the mantis creatures had no face, no large eyes like a mantis, despite their body structure being very similar, no mouth or mandibles like a typical insect. only a pair of antennae that slowly waved about at the top of what I could only assume to be their heads. Their vibrations, however, were unmistakably like an insect, one-dimensional, predictable, as if being controlled, devoid of emotion. The creature that they carried was different. It had eyes that rotated independent of each other, like a chameleon observing both the regiment and the slaves. It continued to walk toward us after the mantis creatures stopped, not having a carapace nearly as strong or dense. In fact, the creature seemed to be naked outside of the pieces of carapace that covered parts of its abdomen, head, arms, and legs. It walked only on two powerful frog-like legs and had only a pair of long arms on either side of its torso. The creature seemed to be half man, half lizard, very distinct from its insectoid subordinates. As it reached General Mba, a small slit in the torso portion of its carapace opened, revealing a small metallic cylindrical shape in a pair of soft, slimy hands within its chest. The creature grunted, gesturing from its head to the generals. "What sort of spectacle is this abominable creature making?" the general said, his hand firmly on the handle of his blade. "Sir," I interjected, "I believe it to be a small njiko." The general released a quick vibration of surprise. "Njikoda? One that size? How could it possibly establish any form of communication being so small? Perhaps it's not ours. Perhaps they built it to communicate with each other, or communicate with us. I believe it wishes to talk to you through it." The general paused, his hand still firmly on his blade handle, and his gaze firmly on the lizard man. Although ready for battle, there was an underlying fear hidden deep within his chai. "Very well, Commander," he said. "Since you trust this thing so, perhaps it's best if you take the Njiko and talk to it. Relay back any interesting findings." I was taken back. Staring at the general, I wanted to chastise the man there where he stood. How could he be so cowardly as to make me, his second-in-command, do such a thing when he was in charge? "That is an order," the general said, fear waving deep within his commanding tone. I floated from behind the regiment and landed beside the general. The lizard man stood taller than both of us, despite it being shorter than the mantis creatures. The small Njiko in the soft, damp hand extended from its carapace, and I reached for it.
Chapter 2. Adalola. Mother's embrace was hollow. There was no warmth in her inner wave, no life left in her eyes. Father was going to live, but the cost was too great. "Mother, please do not lose hope," I pleaded. She was a former woman of royalty, and now could no longer keep her gaze off the ground. "Iwo has fallen. My sons are dead. My husband, whom the Guardians took such pity on, a lame who knows not who he is anymore. My only daughter is being taken away, to be subjugated by the very enemies that destroyed our home. What hope is there, my daughter?" Mother's voice wavered, looking at the shackles on my wrists and ankles. My inner wave trembled with sadness, listening to Mother's words, her inner wave deathly still. "Move!" the Guardian behind me shouted, shoving me away from my mother. The trembling in my inner wave shifted into violent waves of rage. The Guardians were truly evil, just as evil as the king they served. I wanted to command the earth to shatter the flimsy metal shackles and break free to kill the Guardian taking me away from Mother. I hadn't any command over earthly elements. Moreover, the soldiers' regiment would surely descend on me, swiftly killing me where I stood. I could not do that to Mother. I was now the only capable living warrior of the once proud and strong Ifayemi family. I had to go to this Guardian camp and work. Mother and father must survive and at least be at peace in their old age. I was made to leave the quarters into the cold wind. The cycle of the 3 suns had ended. It was only a cycle ago where our entire enclave had celebrated our victory over the Guardians. But now, things were different, far worse than anyone who celebrated that victory could have ever imagined. I was brought into the compound with the other surviving warriors of Iwo. All were dejected, shackled, and unable to look each other in the eye. "March!" the Guardian in charge of our company ordered. How could a people so softly spoken conquer us so resoundingly? I thought while listening to the soldier's strange accent when speaking our language. We all said nothing as the Guardians marched us toward the shores. There was nothing to be said. He were defeated. I looked only toward the metal shackles jingling around my wrists, my thoughts fixed on the two Guardians that ordered that my father be kept alive to make an example of Iwo warriors. Their names, I could never forget. I would never forget. General Emba and Commander Eze. I swore inwardly to enact revenge on these men. This feeling only intensified when the company was made to march past the Soroibi, the central-most part of Iwo, a place of commerce before the war and where the final battle against the Guardians was staged, the place where my dear brother Dio was killed and where father should have died. The place had been rebuilt by the Guardians in the short amount of time they occupied my home. Their tacky, obnoxious metal constructs were everywhere, spreading like a virus throughout the land. A group of masqueraders danced and berated us as we passed by. Behold the mighty warriors of Iwo, the ones descended from the men that defeated Oyo, the ones who descended from the men that conquered the harsh marshes of Iko. Like small children trying to fill out their father's robes, they tried to fight the Adimians as their fathers fought Oyo, but failed to realize not all conflicts can be solved with war. Oh, great shame on the children of ignorance! Oh, great shame on the children of pride! We, the children of reason, shall survive, and those, the children of ignorance, shall die. Their jeering song made me clench my fists. These masqueraders were of a clan within Iwo that were against the war from the start, and now their influence was spreading. They betrayed the enclave. More people of Iwo joined them as they danced around us, chanting the song and beating the talking drums that mimicked the lyrics. The Guardians eventually made the crowd disperse as we approached the shore. The Guardians' massive ships of metal sat in the waters, the very same waters where my father and my forefathers would board their much smaller wooden canoes and go fishing. The Guardians' ships were unnatural and obnoxious, often destroying the delicate vegetation set up around the shoreline that fed Iwo's people, including the traitors, whose chants could be heard echoing from the distance. We were made to get into the ship, each of us given portions of a pungent grey slop in our hands, and told to eat. My stomach turned immediately when taking a bite of the slop. It could hardly pass for food. I flung it out of my hands and spat the remaining out of my mouth. Whatever it was sour. My back burned with lashes from the Guardians following what I just did. It stung, but I did not react or fall to my knees. I would not. My body was weak and still bruised from the final battle with the Guardians only weeks ago, but I would not allow myself to submit to the pain inflicted upon me by a lesser warrior. The soldier that lashed me for rejecting that sour grey slop formed stones on his hand and struck me on the side of my face. Still, I refused to yield to the boy. He seemed young, younger than me. It took many blows from his soft, uncalloused hands before I eventually lost balance and fell onto my back. The world spun, my vision blurred. There was muffled arguing going on above me. The Guardians were arguing among themselves in their language. There was darkness soon thereafter. The crisp morning air that blew from the sea was tainted with the pungent smell of the leaf the Guardian General was smoking. I knelt there with the remaining members of my platoon, Iwo's most fearsome warriors, brought down by the overwhelming numbers of the heavily armoured Guardians and their giant metal ships. I kept my eyes locked on the man drawing the horrible-smelling smoke from his leaf. I would eventually kill him. For father, for my brothers, for Iwo. The man second in command rambled on in Iyade, the language of my people. His accent was strange. The pronunciation of certain words made him sound like a child, but one thing was clear. The Guardians were here to stay. Not just in Iwo, but the entire Echo. The day had passed and the night sky stretched across Iwo. The gods had not cast their favour on the land. It was as if I were in a bad dream. Kayode was missing. Dio was certainly dead, killed right in front of me only the night before. And father? He was surely dead too. It wasn't possible for him to be alive, not after the injuries he suffered in the very same battle that took Dio. All of us, the survivors, the defeated, were silent and sullen in the cage we shamefully found ourselves in. Guardians kept watch over our entrapment to ensure we wouldn't escape. I could easily break free from this prison, but where would I go? Most of the capable warriors were either captured or dead. The other enclaves of Echo did not stand with Iwo. Moreover, the Guardians controlled the seas. The war was over. The soldiers keeping guard over us abruptly halted and turned to salute another Guardian whose armour was of a slight gold tint, with a blue cloth draped across his shoulders. It was the second in command that spoke earlier. My fists were so tight, my nails nearly pierced my skin as my jaw grinded. There was no water around to attack the man with, so I commanded the air, pushing it towards the Guardian. He flicked the weak wind tunnel away as if swatting a fly. Wind was certainly not my strongest ability, but I did not care. I braced myself for retaliation, but to my surprise, the tall man only smiled as he came upon the wooden barrier between us. His face unblemished and skin vibrant, his inner wave calm. It was almost as if this man had never seen battle. "Your father will live," he said with his strange accent. "Tambura, the force which gives us life, demands benevolence. Let there be no more bloodshed. Only peace between Adimians." His smile invoked a deep anger within me. I am a proud warrior of Iwo. I am no Adimian. Murderer. I used whatever strength I had, left to spit only a drop of stringy saliva at the Guardian. It was all I could produce, being so dehydrated. I tried to freeze the saliva with a reforming technique to form a blade, as the other Guardians with him yelled a foreign word I did not understand, entrapping me from the jaw down in an encasing of sand, my mouth covered, my hands bound, my chi too weak to reform the saliva on the Guardian's face into a blade without the use of a hand sign. "When you have calmed down, you may see him and your mother before you go." "Go?" I thought. "Why, yes," the Guardian said, as if reading my thoughts. "The gifts of King Ndubisi come with a debt. If we are to help you rebuild your home, you must work for us." There was a collective concerned grumble coming from the rest of the captured warriors, who did not come to my aid. "Worry not," the Guardian said. "This is only a contract, a chance to pay your debt to the king and provide for your families. It will end after 3 cycles of the suns. After this, you may return home." "To what exactly?" Toby, one of the younger warriors of the troop, spoke out. Toby was an outcast boy whose lowly caste parents died when he was young, rendering him a rejected orphan. "Dear boy," the Guardian said to him, kneeling to meet his gaze. "After you've paid your debt to the king, all of Adim is your home. You may go anywhere and be anything, free from labels and confines. For it is as Tambura's teachings say, man is born free." A crushing feeling in my inner wave woke me from the dream I was having of past events. It was as if the Guardian's ship taking us to the encampment hit a boulder. But the water was calm as the rushing propellers whizzed through the sea. I sighed. Even in my dreams, I was not free from the subjugation of the fanatical soldiers of this King Ndubisi. I was not free from that blue-caped Commander Eze and his smug, substance-addicted General Emba. I would eventually come to learn their names from the healer of the South, the one which the Guardians forced to save my father. I would not forget their names. 3 cycles was but a droplet. I would track them down afterward. The crushing feeling hit my gut again. All of the warriors I was shackled with in the belly of the ship hit the floor. But as we lay there, pressed against the cold metal floor, there was nothing. The ship continued whizzing through the water unaffected. By the gods, what was that horrible sting? A boulder. "Femi," a kin of mine asked. "No, it was no such thing." Another warrior answered. Another insisted it was, and they began to have an argument on what exactly hit the ship. All the while I kept on the floor, my ear pressed against the cold metal, listening to the sea. "Watch Lola!" Femi shouted over the argument upon taking notice of what I was doing. "Sister, what say you about this?" he asked. "It is neither boulder nor imagination," I eventually answered, listening deep within the wave, just as father and mother had taught me. There was something there, something quite deep and far away, but so massive it emitted sharp vibrations through the water. "Well, you are children of echo, are you not? Let us combine our sea-listening abilities to ensure I have not descended into madness," I insisted, sure of what I sensed. It was incredibly unusual, but I had to be sure. The warriors of Iwo followed my orders. All of us lay on the floor, listening. We all sensed it, even if water manipulation was not the primary form of manipulation for all the warriors. "This is troubling," Femi whispered after a long while of listening. The whales, which were plentiful this time of year, were nowhere in sensing range. The schools of fish the whales feasted on, the very same fish my family would catch, were scattered in an unusual pattern, dispersed in smaller groups in pockets of water away from the source of the boulder-like vibration we all sensed. "It is as if it's a caterpillar scrunching and expanding on a leaf, but through the sea," I said. Femi nodded, agreeing with my puzzling observation. "This water insect, I think it ate the whales," he surmised, to which I agreed. I could sense 12 of these sea caterpillars clearly, with countless faint, similar vibrations approaching from a distance. "Could this be the work of the Guardians? Perhaps some sort of creature they farm?" I asked, hoping to be wrong. "It must be. Surely these water insects are some sort of livestock," another warrior said, to my dismay. "These have been the waters our ancestors have thrived on for generations," Femi said, the life in his eyes drained. "Now there will be no more glowing apaya to illuminate the seas at night, no more giant fanged yanyan for a warrior to catch to prove himself. With these things in the sea, there will be no more gliding Eja Aro to trap, no more jeweled obokun for women to adorn their jewels with. All these things that make us proud children of Echo, erased. Just like our way of life and our families and their honour. What is there to go back to, dear Lola, my elder sister? What are we to return to?" Femi asked. Tears flooded his eyes. Many of the warriors in the ship sobbed with him. A deep ache soured my inner wave. He was right. All the good things of the past were dead. Iwo was gone, Coyote and Dio, gone. The only fragments of the past, my mother whom the Guardians had rendered into poverty until her debt was paid, and my father. Broken, brittle, elderly. There was truly no hope. I began to sob, the deep pain spewing out of me like vomit. There was a bang on the door sometime after. "Quiet down, what is the matter with you all? Are you not the famed warriors of Iwo, sobbing like children over a lost battle?" a Guardian said from the other side of the door. "Be grateful you are being shown mercy, whining brats." "Murderers!" I lashed out, rushing toward the door, recklessly releasing tunnels of wind at the thick metal door separating me from the Guardian. "Stop at once!" he shouted, placing his hand firmly on the handle of his blade. "What for? So that we can be your obedient subordinates? After you destroy our home, our way of life, and now our seas? If this is indeed the new age, I'd rather be dead in the past." Most that had been shackled in the room joined me as I sought to break through the door and fight the Guardians on the ship. I knew I would not survive, but so be it. "Convoluted young fools!" the Guardian snarled with his blade drawn after the door had been destroyed. "King Andubisi wishes to spare your lives. Do not reject the gift he has given you." "There is only erasure. There is no gift," I cried, my fists clenched. My breath shallow, my body tired, weak, hungry. But we were at sea, surrounded by water. If this were my final stand, I would surely take the Guardians of this ship with me to the land of spirits. There were at least 5 more Guardians positioned to attack from the higher decks. I could make use of a rushing wave technique to drown them, but the strain on my inner wave would render me useless in battle afterward. We are bringing civilization to your people. It was you that chose to resist." The edges of the Guardian's blade became adorned in flame at his command. "In 3 cycles, Iwo will be yours again, along with the king's gifts. You'll all be able to return home, to your seas, and to the way of life you are so adamantly keen to protect. Before you choose to die here, I encourage you to think. The arrogance of you foreigners never ceases to amaze me. You kill our parents and spare our lives and call it a gift. You enslave us in your camps and call it freedom. You destroy the wildlife of our seas and expect us to return to our way of life after our enslavement." I then asked the sea for permission. It abided, allowing me to command the waves to rise. The sea listened, but it wavered under my command. My chi was weak, given my physical state. The Guardian raised an eyebrow, his inner wave shifting from one of annoyance to that of confusion and intrigue. "We have done no such thing to your waters. Crazy woman." I could attack, his guard was down, but I needed time to gather the strength to use the wave. "Then whom exactly is responsible for those worms deep beneath the sea? The ones which ate our whales, the ones which ate our fish, the ones which approach in great numbers." The Guardian paused. A puzzled look stretched across his face which made him cock his head to the side, looking at me as if I were a child saying something unintelligible, and began to laugh. "Water worms?" He and his fellow soldiers started to laugh. "Someone feed this one and give her water, she has gone mad." The Guardians continued laughing. Crashing waves of rage filled my inner wave as one of the Guardians placed a hand on my shoulder. "Do not mock me," I yelled, striking the Guardian. The rage within gave me enough strength to command the waves and make them rise above the ship on either side. "Enough of this," the Guardian commanded, the flame burning on his blade again. "Confused girl, you will stop at once. There are no water worms which have eaten the whales and all the fish in these seas. You will stop now." I held his gaze. There was annoyance within his inner wave, but not deception. He was being honest. He truly believed there was nothing in the sea. Whatever it was in the water, it was not the doing of the Guardians. I released the water I was commanding immediately. "Get back into your quarters," the Guardian insisted. "If you are being honest, and the worms which crawl deep within these waters are not your livestock you have brought with you, I implore you to listen." Guardian sighed at my words, rolling his eyes. "Into your chambers, now." But I would not budge, nor would the other warriors of Iwo. "Lola is not mad, she is honest. Listen, sir, please, if only just once." They pleaded with the Guardian. Even Toby, the reject boy who did not join us in our initial revolt, emerged from the quarters. "Sir, there is indeed something deep within the sea, and it is not of this place." The Guardian paused for a long while, holding my gaze. "If this is an attempt at some sort of trap, I will see to it that you are made an example of." The tight grip of the Guardian pinched at my skin. He released his hold before following me into the quarters, signalling for the other Guardians to lock in on him to enhance his abilities and keep watch. I led him to the very spot where I earlier laid and sensed the water insects the first time. "Lay here. Put your ear to the floor." The Guardian hesitated, watching me through a suspicious gaze, but eventually did as I said. "What is the primary element you connect with?" I asked. "Sun. Let the waves of the sea act like the rays of the sun, carrying the radiations of the sea within it." The Guardian closed his eyes. Despite sun manipulation being his primary ability, he listened well and was calm. He laid there for a while, following my instructions, listening to the waves. "It's empty," he said. "Indeed. But let the waves carry you deeper. Draw on the inner waves of your comrades who are locked onto this room." The Guardian laid there with his eyes closed even longer. Just when I thought he might have fallen asleep, his eyes shot open. The calm inner wave made way for an unsteady worry. He said nothing to me, picking himself up and quickly leaving the room. He returned to the quarters shortly after with a robed guardian, his commander but not Commander Ease. This man looked much older and weathered. They spoke in their curious Adimian tongue before the guardian turned his attention to me. "My commander wishes to lock onto you while you sense the waters," I agreed, laying down with an ear to the floor. It did not take long to sense the creatures as they were much closer, nearly breaching the surface. They were massive, their inner waves, intrusive, making the hairs on my arm shoot up as I gasped and shot up to my feet. I felt the unsettled inner wave of the commander having been locked onto me. The look on his face assured me that these giant sea worms did not belong to the Guardians. The commander immediately signalled for his underling to follow him as they left the room. It had been hours since the ship came to a halt. The day's sun was coming into its highest point. More Guardian ships accumulated near the ship we were captive on, just sitting in the water, trying to sense what had breached the waters ahead. Although there were no windows in the quarters, myself and the rest of the warriors of Iwo could sense it. It sat atop the water, stationary and light, but yet so heavy. It was certainly organic, containing an inner wave comparable to a slug or worm, yet it was so lifeless. I sensed a small boat from one of the Guardian ships leave the greater collection of vessels and make its way toward the creature. "Help me keep a lock on that boat," I said to Femi, who connected with Earth. I was able to sense the trajectory of the small but speedy boat the Guardians sailed toward the water worm on. The troop trembled at the might of the massive insect that breached the water. Their inner waves shook about with uncertainty and fear, further confirming that these creatures did not belong to them. Their boat floated in place a fair distance from the creature, which began to do something shortly after. I could only interpret the action as shifting. It changed shape. Where before, it was a massive circle that was slinking its way under the water the same way a caterpillar slinked its way on a leaf, or a worm in dirt. It was now rigid and triangular, emitting an immense wave that eventually overpowered the wave and vibrations of the Guardians and their ship. The wave was so immense, Femi and I were both forced to withdraw our lock. I grabbed my ears, trying to soothe the pulse that ripped between my eardrums. My stomach wrenched at the ringing that seemed to vibrate from my head to my chest and eventually throughout my entire body. It was as if I had been struck by the bolt of a sun manipulator. The ringing slowly faded with the return of my vision. I hurried to my feet, having fallen on my back from the ringing. Some of the other warriors were still catatonic. Femi was among those that had regained his senses, his inner wave shaken. "We must get off this ship. They are coming," he said, his voice wavering, his eyes wide. "Indeed," Toby agreed, undoing the shackles placed upon him with a combination of his sun and earth manipulation. "Who is coming?" I demanded, following both of them, who began hastily freeing the other warriors after freeing me. "You did not sense it, as you are connected with water and not sun or earth," Toby said, making his way about the quarters with Femi to free the others. "There are other creatures that emerged from that worm, hundreds, ascending from it like wasps from a hive, each one massive in stature and heavily armoured. The Guardians are battling them now, but they lack enough numbers to keep the creatures at bay. We need to get off the water and fortify ourselves from these things on shore."
Chapter 3. Achan. The cool air coming from the sea ruffled the leaves of the forest. I wrapped my scarf tight while adjusting my dress so as to not let the cold in. Many moons had passed since our clan embarked on the pilgrimage of truth, leaving home to travel to distant lands in order to discover the truths of nature. No land our clan travelled to was in such turmoil as the land of Iwo. The war between the proud people of this land and those that called themselves the Guardians had ended, and the Guardians now ruled. Their rule came at a great cost. Many people native to the land were either injured, sick, or broken from the war. There were so many in need. It was overwhelming. Our clan were the only healers left, and the burden was now on us to care for the defeated peoples of Iwo. Mornings were the only break I had from the healing quarters. Father Bol, our leader, ran all of us tight, ensuring that the people of Iwo received adequate care before we moved on. Despite the cold, I rather liked the break. The war had left many scars on the land, but its forest, a sacred place for the people of Iwo, was left untouched. It was beautiful, different from the vast and empty sand dunes of home. The enclave of Iwo was much smaller, one of many islands in the territory known as Echo. There was life everywhere within its forest, which was often illuminated with all kinds of noise from different animals. But as I foraged, collecting vital herbs, something was amiss. Aside from the call of crickets and the buzzing of insect wings, there were no bird calls, no scurrying tracks of rodents. The loud monkeys that usually sang during the morning were not singing. The silence was unsettling. I looked to the sky, checking for storm clouds, but my view was covered by the thick of the forest. I collected a few more herbs and shrubs that contained special healing essences before making my way to my favorite point that overlooked Iwo's ports. The skies were empty, not so much as a single cloud. The giant metal ships of the Guardians occupied the ports as the people below went about their business. All seemed normal. Oddly, I couldn't help but feel as if something was off, looking back toward the forest that was still relatively soundless. Something in the far distance caught my attention. There was a hum, not like the melodious hum of music, but a constant one, similar to that of a ram's horn, but deeper and more ominous. My eyes stayed fixed on the horizon, where the noise came from. As the sound grew louder, so too did there appear to be something accompanying it. Smoke? I thought, as a black cloud rose above the horizon. Looking down at the shore of Iwo, others had stopped their tasks, noticing the hum of the black cloud. My heart was racing, watching the smoke and the hum grow louder until the sun's light was blocked out, leaving only the day's cool air blowing on my garments. Panic started to set in below. Worried gasps came from the enclave's citizens, which prompted the Guardians to form up. Some of them gathered around their ships, some took to higher ground. I should have turned back toward the forest at once, seeing as though the Guardians, mighty and heavily armored, took defensive positions. But my body would not move. The hum grew to an ear-wrenching buzz as the smoke permeated closer. At first the smoke appeared to be grainy, but as it neared, the small grains in the sky started to take individual shape. It was not smoke at all, but rather a swarm of living creatures, unlike any I had ever seen. The things that flew overhead were insect-like. The many limbs of these creatures swayed back in the air like that of a wasp. My wind manipulation was very minor, and as such, I could not come to understand the full scope of the creature's biology. But they looked to have a thick exoskeleton, the likes of which, along with their size, made them appear much too large and heavy to be capable of flight. My mind raced, trying to recall the creatures our clan had encountered on this journey. None were like this. I could not recall Father Bol mentioning creatures like the ones that had just landed on Iwo's ports. The noise of these immense creatures evoked an instinctual fear in me, enough to finally spur me into a slow retreat towards the forest. My eyes still fixed on the port. They landed like giant droplets of black rain. First a few, then in dozens shortly after, with a countless amount landing in every direction in droves, each one letting off a dreadful, deep buzz that shook the ground. At first, there were screams and explosive bursts coming from within the enclave. The fighting that ensued between the guardians and the creatures was almost instantaneous. It was hard to tell who struck first, but the creatures swarmed the guardians with their overwhelming numbers. The guardians fought back, fending them off with various projectile attacks. I sharply turned back toward the forest and began running as fast as I could. Despite the guardians' attacks, which managed to fend off the creatures that landed on the port, there were more landing overhead, deeper within the enclave, beyond the forest. But like droplets of rain, some landed inside the forest, one just outside the forest, onto the vantage point overlooking Eel's ports, directly in front of me. I ran toward the creature with all my might. It had so much mass it seemed to be reorienting itself from landing. It made a series of clicks and snaps. The giant antennae on either side of what I could only describe as its head were fluttering. While it was in its trance, I manipulated the soil to rise as I raced towards it, launching into the air. Not directly over the creature, but past it into the thick of the forest. Bombarded with branches almost immediately, I called upon the sand to envelop my arms as I swung them in a rhythmic pattern that the earth agreed with. The sand dancing technique broke the thin branches, giving me a clearer view to avoid the larger ones. I was able to use the heavy vibrations of the trees to guide myself to a smooth landing, clutching the herbs I collected earlier as I ran along. I focused my chi onto the ground while keeping my breath steady, calling upon the earth to guide me and show me the trajectory of the other creatures that had landed in the forest. The earth relayed their location almost immediately. Their vibrations were immense and strange, yet familiar. There was no denying that the creatures were insects by nature, each containing identical vibrations as if they were copies of each other, similar to that of a worker ant or bee. It would stand to reason that a group of humans would be a valuable food source for such creatures, given the thousands of sharp daggers hidden away within their heads. In fact, as I ran along sensing the creatures, their grotesque biology became clearer. What I initially thought to be their head was more of a giant mouth. The sharp daggers were more like spikes, connected to a flexible, soft tongue hidden away inside a hard exoskeleton, anatomy that was both foreign and terrifying to me. The creatures seemed to move slowly and ponderously through the thick of the forest. Their large, porous bodies seemed ill-equipped for the environment. Their heavy exoskeletons emitted a cold, iron-like vibration as they clashed with the trees, snapping the thick wood, thudding along. They had many legs, up to 4 on each side of their long abdomens, and a pair of hooked talons on either side of their upper thorax. Another one landed nearby, making me quickly manipulate the soil under my feet to swell into a wave, bracing me for an abrupt stop. The technique caused a loud bang, immediately drawing a swift response from the creatures. They heard me and started converging. I ran as fast as I could, quickly diving into a nearby bush, placing my chi in disguise by melding it with the soil of the forest. Just as I suspected, 2 of the creatures violently burst out of the thick of the forest, tangling with each other in a clash. They kept on the floor, their bodies tangled and still, but their antennae active and fluttering. It seemed as if they had gotten a faint hint of my scent and were trying to locate me. I wouldn't be safe for long in this position, despite having molded my vibrations to that of the forest. These insects, if they were anything like the insects of this land, had the natural ability to sense past abilities that could only fool most humans. Ants themselves are like master manipulators when it comes to sensing with their antennae, being able to see beyond such superficial levels as sight, touch, and smell. Rather, they can decipher the most microscopic shift of vibrations beyond what many earth manipulators could do. Luckily, the insects of this land never grew larger than a grain of rice. Laying in the bush watching these giant creatures made me realize my misfortune. The creatures would surely find me, but they were slow. This certainly was an environment they were not accustomed to. Why have you come here? I maintained the chi disguise, slowly crawling up a tree for a better escape route. They could be outmaneuvered once they discovered me. There was buzzing coming from all around the land, filling the air with such noise. It was hard to think. Surely some of the more open parts of Ilu that were not under the provision of the Guardians were overrun, but the more fortified, protected areas like the healing quarters would have been safer than here. I had to return, but I needed to know more about these creatures to be able to share my knowledge with the rest of the clan. I sat atop a branch and watched in silence and complete stillness. The creatures had still not sensed me. They laid there, antennae still fluttering away. The fluttering slowed until it was only faint twitches. One of them started moving, untangling its limbs from the other until it stood up, using all 8 of its legs in tandem to take giant thuds toward my hideout. The top half of its body was just as tall as the trees. I was only high enough to reach up to its abdomen. The creature was incredibly beautiful up front. Its black exoskeleton had an underlying silver glow that made it appear glass-like. It had gold streaks that glistened in the spotty rays of the sun. It emitted a heavy release of oxygen with every thud, seeming to take in and release air simultaneously through small holes in its exoskeleton. Its breathing had a calming rhythm. I asked the liquid in the creature's body permission to relay to me its secrets. The water inside the creature granted me permission to shift my chi through its vital organs. Finding strange things normally unseen in insects, like multiple lungs and hearts. It was unclear whether the strange thing had a stomach or brain. Elements of both could be found in its upper thorax area under its giant mouth. What exactly are you? I found myself asking, being taken back by the faceless thing. The other that had been tangled together on the floor also stood, slowly following behind the one approaching, releasing a clicking sound through holes near its antennae. They knew where I was, yet they approached so cautiously. I did not have time to decipher why they showed restraint. The ground beneath the creature shifted, and a guardian emerged from within, hacking off one of the creature's hooked pincers with a bright red flash of a blade. 3 more of the armored soldiers followed behind, attacking the creatures head-on. The guardians were much faster than the creatures, but their exoskeleton was near impenetrable. I took the opportunity to make off, leaving the forest toward the healing quarters. I had been about these woods often and knew to head east, asking the earth to help propel me from tree to tree. I could sense the vibrations of one of the creatures following behind, but kept pushing, the clearing of the forest where the healing quarters was ahead.
Chapter 4. Commander Eze. My jaws chattered beyond my control. The place was cold and dark, yet there was no wind. I was bound, but I was not in chains. In fact, as I questioned why I was cold, my jaws stopped chattering and the cold stopped. There was still no wind on my skin. There was no radiation from the sun or vibrations along the ground. No chains on my wrists or legs despite being bound. It was my mind that was bound, Whatever device the lizard man made me touch brought me here. But where was this dark place? I had felt this before, an entrapment from a master wind manipulator. But that experience was different. It was a much more elaborate trap, drawing on my emotions to make me relive past memories. But this place was not my mind. My mind was trapped here, in this corridor of sorts. The only discernible feature of this strange place was a faint white mist floating along the ground that carried some light among the darkness. It was a curious sight. There was no sun here, so exactly what made the mist glow? I focused on the glowing haze. It appeared vaporous, so I applied my water manipulation to try to sense its inner wave. A whisper emerged from the fog. It was too faint to be intelligible. I focused as much as I could on the mist, being sure to mimic a competent water manipulator to make my chai boundless with its constant flow. With this, the whispers grew louder. "You are bound by the will of the Queen Mother," the voice said. It was rasp and wretched, sounding as if it were scratches on bark that had somehow been formed into a voice. "You shall serve the needs of your masters," the voice continued. It rang so deep in my ears I regretted deciphering the message. The repetitive phrases of the voice echoed between my eardrums. It was discombobulating. It seemed to bind my mind to wherever this place was, as if it were a set of commands. The echoing continued long after I retracted my chi. At first I would succumb to it, being weighed down by its overwhelming might. But if this were a trap, it could be broken. I focused on the mist once again. The voice became louder the more I focused. It stopped becoming a voice, but rather a constant shriek. I sought to take command of the mist. The shrieking continued until I had full command. Then there was silence. My physical body seemed to form within the damp, dark corridor, albeit there was a little bit of the light coming from the mist I now had command over. It seemed to be emanating from a single point at the far end of the corridor. I became concerned wandering toward the source of the mist. A familiar vibration was radiating at what seemed to be the mist source. It was identical to the insect-like vibrations of the creatures the regiment did our dealings with. Just as I suspected, an insect stood at the edge of the mist. However, it was not like the ones we encountered on the sea. Those ones were faceless and only reminiscent of a mantis or an ant, whereas this one was identical to a mantis. Long antennae, large eyes, mandibles and all. The white mist permeated from its antenna in separate directions. "Child, do not reject Queen Mother's command," the wretched voice returned. It seemed to be coming from the giant mantis. "Who is Queen Mother, and why do you hold me here in this strange corridor?" The creature stood on its hind legs, dwarfing me. "We have been watching. Your species scurry like rodents, directionless, aloof, recklessly yielding a power you cannot grasp." It was somewhat clear to me what it wanted. "You wish to harness the power of manipulation," I said to it. "You are to be converged with the collective," it answered. White mist stretched from the creature's antennae toward me. I manipulated the condensation to wrap around me and reform the small droplets within the mist into ice, forming a long, sharp blade, which I launched at the creature, removing its head. It gave a horrible ear-ringing shriek before disappearing. The mist disappeared with it. The corridor brightened, but it was still a formless place with no direction. Each of my regiment members were laying in the place where the slain and disappeared insect was. Everything suddenly disappeared as if it were a mirage. I found himself bound again. This time it was physical bondage. My body was wrapped tightly in what felt like silk. Focusing on the thin, yet dense vibrations of my entrapment, I broke the silk with the pressure of my chai. The place was almost just as dark as the corridor my consciousness was trapped in. But it was a physical place. I sensed a pulse radiating from the ground, as if the land beneath my feet carried a heartbeat. There were many pulses, working in tandem with countless giant organs and slow vibrations that were reminiscent of a worm or caterpillar. This was the insect's ship, and it was alive. There were vibrations of other silk cocoons near me. Rushing toward them, I sensed the chai from within were weak, but unmistakably that of my comrades. I pressed my hand against the cocoon, bursting it with my pressure and clawing for Kir, who lay docile. "Kir, awaken!" I hastily whispered, tapping the young water manipulator on the face, noticing a faint buzzing from far away, converging on our location. Kier awoke in a confused daze. "Commander," he said, his eyes drowsy, "awake now. We must get off this ship, unless you wish to be meat for these creatures to consume." Kiri stumbled to his feet and started to help me free the others. When I came upon General Mba's silk entrapment, I paused. I could easily have burst open my superior's cocoon, but I couldn't, hesitating outside his cocoon for a long while, my hands shaking with anger. If I left this wretched man on the ship, no one would be the wiser. The buzzing snapped me from my hesitation as I burst open the general's cocoon. He seemed to be in a trance despite my attempts to wake him. The buzzing grew louder. I glanced at the entrance where the creatures would come from, only to find Kiere fighting with our fellow regiment members, Nzonga and Takul. My first instinct was to intervene and get my underlings in order, but I observed further. Nzonga and Takul were not themselves. Their chi did not radiate any malicious or unsteady emotions. In fact, it was the contrary. They fought with no emotion, deploying a variety of techniques that pushed Kier back. I had witnessed them in battle before, and skilled soldiers they were, but I had never seen such efficiency from them. I rushed to Kier's side, shielding the young soldier from their onslaught with fortified bits of cocoon from the ground. "You fools!" Kier cried out. "What is the matter with you? The insects still have their minds." I yelled over the projectiles being fired. Remembering the dark corridor the mantis creature had all of our minds trapped in. I recalled the awful voice the mantis spoke with. Its dreadful whisper must surely be still in the heads of my now indoctrinated comrades, carrying out the set of orders which drove them blindly to treason. The buzzing stopped temporarily as soon as heavy metallic vibrations tapped near the entrance of the room. The faceless insects poured in like rushing water, swarming through in great numbers. Without a second thought, I grabbed Kakir by the wrist and shot a burst of flame with my free hand, propelling us upwards from our cocoon shield, and commanded the sun's energy through my feet to fly toward the creatures. They were large and slow despite their ability to walk on walls as a fly could. Kier drew water from his canteen, hurling shards of frozen ice at them, but their exoskeletons were too thick. The sharp blades shattered like glass upon making contact. Despite the swipes from the creature's sharp limbs and stingers, I was able to guide us out of the room into the massive corridor of the living ship. I could sense the faint yet unmistakable ray of sunshine coming from an opening northward from our location. We were near the bottom of the ship, and I was running out of energy to command the sun. The ship was so immense, it felt as if I was an ant trying to escape a human-sized trap. My heart sank when the walls shook in tandem with a constant buzzing coming from every direction. I had to continue flying toward the sun's single strand of radiation at the top of the ship. Stopping for a rest would be certain death. "Kier!" I shouted. "Sir!" he answered. "Use your blade. Projectile attacks will not work on these creatures. Keep them off of us. Preserve whatever water you have left. We will need it once we get out of here." Kier drew his blade. The insects descended upon us shortly after. At first they appeared to be an ominous cloud in the distance, but soon enough I found myself having to twist and turn through them, evading the swings of their sharp limbs and the deadly blows of their stingers. The creatures were relentless. The only advantage we had over them was our size. We were able to outmaneuver them, despite their seemingly endless numbers. They were relentless, pursuing us with one uniform emotion radiating from their chi: hunger. It was not the same emotionless, methodical nature of my indoctrinated underlings. These creatures were trying to hunt us. They yearned to consume us. The spark within my chi was waning with every twist and turn. Since it was so dark, I did not have an endless supply of energy from the sun. My body had undergone much stress thus far. The use of sun flight was taking its toll. My muscles started to convulse, begging for oxygen. My veins pressed against my armor. Kier, who was not a very large man, felt as if he had doubled in weight since I started flying. The opening at the top of the ship wasn't very far. I pushed on despite the fatigue. My movement was not as sharp. I started to become slow and cumbersome, just like the creatures we were fleeing from. But I would not stop. I couldn't. "I will not die here. We will not die here, I told myself. I focused solely on the ray of sunlight approaching, being struck dozens of times by the creatures. Despite having slowed considerably, I only needed to be just fast enough to get through the insects. And I was. Just as I thought I would be engulfed in the endless cloud of the giant creatures, a single bright strand of light appeared through a narrow hole. I pushed forward with reckless abandonment. All I needed was to touch light to replenish my dwindling chi. When the sun's rays kissed my skin, it was as if I took a gulp of fresh water. I was strong again. I burst through the remainder of the creatures with renewed vigor. My flames propelled me through the narrow hole where the sunlight shone through. Grateful to be off the ship, I released a hearty laugh. We escaped death. I exhaled, feeling the cool air of the eastern sea on my skin. "We will live, young guardian," I shouted excitedly at Kier. But a grave feeling befell me once Kier did not answer. I still held on to his hand, and there was certainly weight attached to that hand. But it was significantly lighter, not because the sun granted me limitless bounds, but because all of Kier was not with me. I sailed through the air, away from the ship, eyes fixed on my vibrationless underling's torso, his innards dangling and falling out. At some point during our escape, Kier had been killed, the bottom half of his body severed from the top half which I still carried. Distracted by more buzzing, I was stumped, looking toward the sea. Endless rows of the insect ships floated along the water, dozens more breaching from underneath the sea. Swarms flew in the same direction I was flying. Toward the enclave of Iwo, some diverted course, flying directly toward me. I regretfully released Kayer's severed corpse into the sea. "May the flow of Tambura allow you safe passage, young warrior. I will fight for you." I allowed the sun's rays to flow through me. So long as the sun was in the sky, I would command it to slaughter as many of these fiendish creatures as I could.
Chapter 5. Adalola. Femi's blood would not stop gushing from the wound on his stomach. I had no healing water with me, only able to use the dirty and damp rags I wore to attempt to stop the bleeding. Taking a boat from the Guardians was not an easy task. Once we freed ourselves from their grasp, Femi became the only living casualty from that exchange. But as the blood continued to flow defiantly from his stomach, I feared he might suffer the same fate as some of our other brethren we had to leave behind. "The shields will not hold," Toby warned. It was him and the others that had their arms extended at the helm of the small boat, using the sun's rays to create static waves over the ship to keep the flying creatures at bay. Femi's injuries were serious, but they did not have to be fatal. Yet, he was in my grasp, slowly dying because I did not have the right type of water available to heal him. "Lola, we need you," Toby called out again. I glared at the thoughtless and cold boy. He was an outcast and could not understand the bond between kin, but he did not redirect his eyes. He stared back at me as if to say there was nothing that could be done about Femi. I gripped the rags on my cousin's stomach. His blood seeped through the spaces of my fingers. No, I can save him, not Femi too. I just need healing water. I can ease his pain. He can rest, and he'll be fine. I just need healing water. A loud crash rocked the boat. One of the flying creatures hit the shield with such force it diverted course, causing the protective static charges over it to falter as some warriors were launched into the sea. The few were collected by other creatures and flown off, their screams drowned out by the dreadful buzzing of the creature's wings. One landed on the boat. Its weight nearly made the water transport lift upwards. I pressed my chi against the metal, anchoring myself to the deck so as not to slide toward the creature. It had a faceless head that slit open, displaying a terrifyingly wide jaw that contained circular rows of needle-like teeth. I commanded a wave to whisk away the abominable thing and rushed to Toby's side, helping him reinforce the shields. There were only 3 of us left now. The boat was barely moving. We were all exhausted beyond fighting condition, and the creatures were relentlessly attacking the barrier. My glance met Toby's and the other warrior that stood with us. We combined our chi, sending a collective burst of static charges that fried the beasts outside of the barrier, offering a moment of clarity from their swarm. More approached in the distance. The peace would not last. Echo's seas were infected with these things. I was no longer able to enjoy the beautiful shoreline view of Iwo in the distance. We were so close, yet not close enough. Toby and the other sun manipulator hurled fire at the approaching creatures to no avail. They had skin that rivaled Guardian armor. I readied my wave once the creatures were close, using all my might to engulf the creatures in it, commanding the sea to take a few, but there were far too many. One got through swinging at us with its long, sharp claw, missing me but catching the sun manipulator beside Toby. Its stinger then struck Toby in the chest. I could only watch as it opened its mouth, revealing its horrendous teeth. A bright flash temporarily blinded me, but there was no pain. I opened my eyes to find a man heavily armored hovering above the slain creature. A guardian, one I knew very well, immediately recognizing the man's face. It was Commander Eze. I rippled the waves underneath the boat to propel it faster in the water. I had lost track of the corpses of my fallen brethren in the heat of battle and was the only one left, myself and the Guardian. We said nothing to each other. He did not ask me how I acquired the boat. I did not ask him what these creatures were or what his business was out here. We seemed to have a common goal, getting to Iwo. The Guardian commander's inner wave was unsettling. He seemed far too calm for all that was going on. I used my sensing on him in an attempt to gather information, but there was nothing. No fear, no anger, no remorse or guilt, just a constant flow of chi, similar to the well-fortified static shield he had encased the entire boat with. It was far more solid than the shield my brethren had erected. It seemed effortless for the Guardian, using only one hand to bring forth the electrically charged shield while he walked about the boat, inspecting it. My inner wave crashed about with contempt. I wanted nothing more than to attack him where he stood, but was outmatched and in need of food and shelter. Moreover, the Guardian could yet have answers to what these creatures were. We remained silent on the boat as it sailed toward Iwo, shielded from the swarm of giant insects that would routinely strike and bounce off the shielding, rattling the deck. The port was almost unrecognizable. Dead insect carcasses and human corpses alike were scattered about, littering the streets, floating about in the waters. Establishments, homes, and even the intrusive metal structures of the Guardians were twisted and destroyed. I braced myself when the Guardian retracted his shield over the boat, but nothing happened. The port was eerily quiet. Faint screams and clicking noises could be heard in the distance. My parents, I thought, remembering the healing quarters they were forced into when the Guardians seized their land. I had to get to them. There was nothing but the sound of waves and the creatures' horrible buzzing overhead. A few would land periodically in the Igbo Mimo, Iwo's sacred forest. But most flew past Iwo heading west, toward the other enclaves of Echo. "Where are the other soldiers?" I whispered while we hastily made our way toward the enclave square where the paths of Iwo split. "I do not know, but I intend on finding out." The Guardian answered calmly, still inspecting his surroundings like he inspected the boat. I assumed the collection of Guardians stationed on Iwo had surely been overrun by this infestation. Eze could very well be the only Guardian left, or perhaps some of the Guardians my brethren battled with at sea had made landfall and were held up. Either way, I was going to find my parents with or without the Guardian. "It makes no sense running," Eze said as I turned toward the path that led to the healing quarters. "You may hate me, but our common enemy makes us allies now." "You are not my ally," I snapped, my teeth grinding. The Guardian did not react and only just stared at me. "Where exactly do you intend on going?" I did not respond. "It is unlikely your parents are alive." His cold words made my fingers tingle. Had there been any water nearby, I would have surely formed frozen daggers. "Do what you must. Go search for them. Make your peace. But now, young warrior, now Tambura demands you to be what you are. A warrior," he said, looking toward the giant insects buzzing overhead. I will leave this place come nightfall for the outpost on the mainland. If you wish to continue fighting, join me." I slowly walked away. I still wanted my revenge, but now was not the time. I turned my back fully on the Guardian and headed toward the Igbo Mimo, where the healing quarters were.
Chapter 6. Eze. The warrior girl fled toward the forest. Her chi was weak, but her will was unshakable. How she was able to walk, much less maintain such a broad command over water, was a sight to behold. She was foolish, though, still holding on to her hatred for me amid the chaos that was unfolding. I did not chase after her. Intuition told me that she will be at the port by nightfall. I turned the opposite way toward the Guardian headquarters. It was not long before I ran into the insects. Slaughtering them became easy. They were too large and slow, and if you struck them at precise points on their underbelly, their exoskeleton was easy to crack. I moved quickly, allowing the sun's rays to flow through me, granting me the ability to move about with unmatched speed, getting underneath the creatures, slashing their shiny, metallic-like exoskeletons at the right points, bursting their hard encasing and finishing them off with lethal blows of the sun. Something caught my attention before coming upon the compound where our outpost was. Strange static vibrations radiated from a house nearby after I had slain another insect. Wandering toward it, I sensed pulses and movement, although this movement was confined within something thick and flesh-like. The smell of blood burned my nose and nausea set into my stomach when I came into the dwelling and saw what horror awaited me there. People from this enclave's merchant caste had been gathered in the hosting quarters of the home, their bellies, necks, and limbs swollen and pus leaking from various lesions throughout their bodies. Muffled, painful cries that sounded more like gasps for air came from the poor souls that were left alive in such a terrible state. As much as I had witnessed throughout my service to King Dubisi, none this gruesome. I sensed the life forms swimming around within the bloated victims. The insects had laid eggs within them, and the hatchlings were about to breach. Without hesitation, I released the thickest stream of flames from my fist that I could form, hearing popping sounds while setting ablaze to the entire dwelling. I would continue this routine along the way, going from dwelling to dwelling, checking to see if there were souls misfortunate enough to have been captured by the insects and used as incubators for future broods. There were guardians already setting ablaze to a dwelling as I drew near the headquarters. "Soldier, report," I ordered, walking toward the acting leader. "Commander." The leader of the small troop said, drawing his fist to his heart and dropping to a knee. "We thought we were the only ones." "At ease, soldier, report," I said calmly, noticing relief not only in the boy's eyes, but that of every soldier present. "These insects, they made landfall after the morning's meal, coming from beyond the Eastern Sea, we suspect. They don't appear capable of communication of any sort and seem to be carrying out basic biological designations of consuming and multiplying." The others had finished setting ablaze to the compound, and we all made our way toward the headquarters. They are slow and easy to kill once you find the weak points in their underbelly. But they are great in number, far greater than us at the moment. We need reinforcements, the young guardian stated. I nodded. The boy knew well. "Have you been able to establish Njiko with the other enclaves or high command?" I asked. "Not yet, sir. The insects destroyed the main Njikota during the infestation. We have soldiers on it currently to rectify and reestablish communication." Curious, I thought, remembering the small Njikota offered by the lizard man before our regiment were forced onto their ship. I said nothing, however, and followed the small troop into the compound headquarters. "I am unaware of the exact casualties we've suffered, but our numbers are down drastically," the boy continued. "There are still enough of us to divide into 3 teams, 2 of which are in this compound." "Very good," I responded, studying the improvised Nyakota they had rebuilt, which appeared to be nearly finished. "You are the highest-ranked survivor?" "No, sir. The advanced team are mostly upper sergeants. They are currently trying to secure the healing quarters." I nodded, remembering the group of Southerners on pilgrimage that had been ordered to extend their stay in Iwo to help the wounded from the battle. The Southerners were renowned scientists. If anyone could make sense of these creatures, it would be them. I would share my knowledge with their leader if given the opportunity, but there were more pressing matters at hand. I placed my hand on the boy's shoulder and smiled. "Great work here, soldier. All of you," I said, calling out to all those around. "Let us use the Njakota and rid ourselves of this infestation." They had made their way inside into the communications room. I ordered everyone inside so we could all combine our sun manipulation abilities to send the request for reinforcements to the other enclaves that were more fortified. I stood at the center, closest to the metal spire. We all induced ourselves with electrical currents. I compressed the memories of the day's events within the strands, the invasion, the casualties, the need for reinforcements, but was sure to omit my regiment's dealings with the creatures. When the static charges of the soldiers were at their strongest, I redirected the energy into the Njakota, but suddenly everything fell black. A discombobulating ringing in my ears made me off balance. But I could not move. I did not have a body. It seemed as though I had returned to the corridor, much to my dismay. Panic soon overtook me as the ringing continued, pinning my consciousness along the floor. The ringing died down into a rhythm I had not heard in a long time, the rhythm of my home enclave. The drum calmed me as I recalled the song my mother used to sing over the steady rhythm. I now found myself in my mother's kitchen. She smiled at me while preparing stew in the pot over the wood. "My son, you are welcome," she said. It was her voice, but there was a faint whisper underneath it, which reminded me that I was not where I thought I was. "Mother?" I asked, looking at her closely. It seemed like her, but I was not fooled. I was supposed to be sending a transmission. How did I end up here? "What troubles you, child?" my mother asked calmly, offering me the stew. I took it, but did not eat. "What are you?" I asked bluntly, figuring this had been another trap laid by the insects. "I represent the collective." "Collective? You mean the insects?" The thing posing as my mother grinned at the question. "We are no more insects as your kind are apes. We are many bodies, but share one voice." "Are you Queen Mother?" I asked, but my mother did not answer, and instead encouraged me to eat. But I would not. "Why do you kill us?" I asked it after it did not answer me. "One never truly dies. Your kind has corrupted the flow of Tambura. We shall bring semblance." "Waging war is your idea of semblance?" I placed the food down beside us. "This is no war, but the beginning of an inevitable convergence," it said. I grew annoyed at the creature's vagueness. "What is this convergence you speak of?" "In time you will see, but you must eat to begin the process," the creature insisted. "I will not," I said, rising to my feet. The look on its face was one of contempt. It looked exactly like my mother. I had to remind myself what it actually was. Everything faded into darkness thereafter. I awoke to find the Njakota shattered into many small pieces, as if it were glass. Staggering to my feet, I found my comrades lying about the communications room, their chi still flowing with their shallow breaths. The sun helped me quickly orient myself, further assessing my downed brethren. They were not dead but appeared to be in a catatonic state, their eyes fluttering and rolling. I remembered my regiment members on the insect ship, how they attacked Kair when the insects had their minds. I quickly shot flames from my fists, propelling myself away from the Guardian's headquarters as quickly as I could, shooting past the two insects that were landing into the compound. I had to leave Iwo as soon as possible, but I needed to make more sense of these creatures. They were an intelligent species. I had to get to the healing quarters to talk to the Southerners.
Chapter 7. Achan. Stomps from the approaching insect invoked a heart-racing fear in my inner wave. Father Bull stood in the middle of the forest clearing, maintaining his holding signal as we all waited in the bushes in our respective positions. I tried my best to focus on the creature's vibrations, sensing past the immense vibrations Father Bull emitted to draw the creature out. Two of my fellow clansmen were positioned ahead of me, readying themselves to trap the insect that lumbered toward us. A woman broke from the cover of the forest, shooting toward Father Bull. I launched myself toward the woman, without a second thought, grabbing her mid-air. Before I could think, I was on my back, with a blade of frozen water pressed upon my neck. The clansman that had been situated opposite of me came to my side. Once the woman saw this, she reformed the frozen blade back into liquid, retracting it back into a pouch made of cowhide. "I mean you all no harm," she said, her eyes tired, her vibrations wilting, her chi weak, but her inner wave steadfast and resolute. "Ifayemi clan," I uttered, remembering the warrior. She snapped her head back toward me. The insect broke into the clearing before the warrior could say anything. I scrambled back to my position, as my clansmen in the advanced position struggled to contain it within an encasing of earth, having broken formation themselves. The giant creature eventually broke free from the trap and raced toward Father Bowl. We scrambled yet again to surround the creature, trapping it. This time it stayed in place, having all of its legs sunken deep beneath the soil right in front of Father Bowl. Its mouth opened, revealing the endless row of tongue spikes it used to break down flesh. Its legs struggled underneath the soil. They were hooked with rough strands of hair throughout. It would eventually break free if Father Bowl's plan did not work. I could only watch on as Father Bowl formed a cloud over the creature's antennae from his palm, using the searching wind technique to see into its mind. All seemed to be going smoothly, until Father Bowl released a painful cry, the likes of which I had never heard before from our normally level-headed leader. "Do not interfere," Father Bowl demanded, grinding his teeth as the warrior girl tried to step in, having formed a long spear-like blade with the water in her pouch. She had it aimed directly toward the creature's mouth. Father Bowl continued his technique, trying to lock with the creature's mind, each time letting off a painful cry until he fell to his knees and grabbed his throat. "Father!" we called out. He nodded and signaled for us to kill the insect. Before any of us could follow his orders, the warrior had already launched her frozen spear in the creature's mouth, killing it instantly. Green blood spurting from its mouth in conjunction with its twitches. We rushed to Father Bowl's side, but he signaled for us not to worry, already making his way to his feet. "Round this magnificent beast up, bring it inside," he said calmly. There was a slight grin on his face, a grin he would only give when intrigued. "Where are my parents?" the warrior asked as we raced the creature from the soil. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, knowing the unfortunate fate that befell the warrior's father. "My dear, please," Father Bowl said to her, leading her into the underground chambers.
Chapter 8. Adalola. The tips of my fingers and toes tingled. Although the healing quarters was a cool underground dwelling, it was as if it was too humid to breathe properly when the king of the healers pulled the cloth from over the corpse. It was Father, laying there still, his inner wave lifeless. "We did all we could, but the injuries were too great. He fell ill," the healer said. I could only just stand there, shaking. Father was a proud warrior, the strongest the enclave could offer. Looking at him now, one would never know that this man brought countless regiments of the best soldiers and warriors to their knees single-handedly. I closed my eyes. This could not be my final memory of him. Maimed and bandaged. This was the warrior's way. The same fate had befallen my brothers and the other warriors of Iwo. Is this the same fate that will befall me? I shook my head after that thought. How could I think such things? I was to be strong. It is what Father would have wanted. I backed away from Father Bowl, the king of the healers, avoiding his comforting gestures. What of my mother? The tall man's calm expression made way for one of dread. She left after his death to collect what she called spiritual instruments for his passing on to the next world. That was before the infestation. My heart dropped even further into the depths of my stomach. I rushed toward the small chamber that would lead above ground without a second thought. My dear, please, Father Bull pleaded, grabbing my wrist. I snatched it back from his grasp right away. With his other hand, he retrieved bread from his cloth. At least feed and nourish yourself before heading back out. I took the bread and a fresh canteen of water from the Healer King and thanked him before heading into the chamber that led above ground. Iwo was infested. These giant creatures scoured every part of the land with their ground-shuddering footsteps, forcing me to hide and scurry like a rodent, avoiding battle to conserve my energy. Mother's life could very well depend on it. Luckily, this was home, and I knew the land well. I could be everywhere the creatures were not, eventually coming upon my family's compound. There were fallen armoured soldiers scattered throughout the land. Their blood stained the soil where we planted our crops. Making my way about the land, closer to the house, I noticed that the armour of fallen guardians was mostly empty. Only a few body parts remained in each. A single limb or a head remained in a pool of blood. I ran toward the entrance of my family's home upon noticing part of the roof missing and the door destroyed. "Mother!" I cried out to no answer. I searched every corner of the home. It had all kinds of metal devices from the Guardians, who had made our home some sort of outpost. I found nothing except more nearly empty, blood-filled Guardian armour. Something caught my attention. A sound. Not the deep buzzing that echoed throughout the land that I had now become accustomed to. This was different. It was as if something was moving in water, and it came from the back of the house where the family shrine was. I slowly walked toward the door, sensing dozens of insect vibrations. Mother. My voice quivered, not wanting to see what I could already sense. I found Mother, or what was left of her, laying in a pool of her own blood that stained the shrine. Tens of dozens of tiny insects appeared to have burst from her stomach and were consuming her insides. I retched the bread, given to me by Father Bull. A deep pain set into the back of my head from the scream I released. Such a horrendous sight was worse than any night terror I could remember. The insects started swarming, forcing me to attack them. Rage filled my body. I was unable to command the elements. Rather, the elements were commanding me. With one stroke of my hand, fire would consume the swarming insects, earth with another, water with another. Elements I did not connect with yet. They were commanding me to kill. Rage caused my inner wave to overflow, filling me so deep I could not feel my body. It felt as if everything was burning, and with that sensation, everything around me started to burn.
Chapter 9. Ilu. A heavy force struck me mid-flight, hurling me toward the ground. I had to break the fall by reanimating the ground beneath me to soften, but was still winded from the force. I shot back to my feet, knowing no insect could strike me with such force unexpectedly. Above and in front of me hovered and stood 7 guardians, a regiment, the very same guardians that had tried to help me contact high command. Only now their chi was uniform, their radiations resolute, and their faces expressionless. The insects had their minds. I engaged the soldiers regretfully. These were supposed to be the reinforcements that were going to aid me in ending this horrendous turn of events. We were entangled in an instant, intertwined in a barrage of elemental projectiles and explosive attacks. Although their minds belonged to the insects, the indoctrinated guardians fought with the same ferocity and intelligence as a guardian, which was alarming. They boxed me in the compound, forcing me to shell up in an earth encasing reinforced with a sun barrier. They fell for the trap and started drawing from the sun barrier in an attempt to break it, which allowed me to sand crawl away. It wasn't long before the indoctrinated bunch tracked my attempt to flee, trapping my chi and drawing me from underneath the earth. Damn it! I was now forced to draw all the energy I could take from the sun to break the hold the guardians had on me, and fled immediately, taking to the sky and retreating. It was a worrisome exchange indeed. If the insects had the capability to watch this battle, not only would they be learning how the guardians engaged in battle, but how they were able to employ their elemental manipulation abilities. The more guardians the insects were able to indoctrinate, the worse things could get if they were able to bolster their already overwhelming numbers with Adimian soldiers. A burst of air combustion went off near my ear. It was discombobulating, having been once again knocked off course. I turned mid-air to gauge how many guardians pursued me. Too many for an aerial exchange. I formed a ball of electricity and fire and launched it in the middle of their formation to break them up. I shot down toward a nearby farm and immediately sought refuge despite sensing the vibration of an insect inside. Rushing toward the living quarters, I kept my eyes on the sky, looking for the guardians that pursued me. It was only a matter of time before they would find me if I did not cloak myself. I would seek to use an entrapment technique on my pursuers, but first I had to slaughter the insect inside the living quarters ahead. I expected it to rush at me with its cumbersome, giant, sharp limbs upon entering, but its vibrations remained almost in a relaxed state in the next room over. I rushed my way to the room, needing to slaughter it before I could cloak the entire house to lay the trap. I hesitated, having fully sensed what the insect was doing before rushing in. In the food storage area, an entire family, 3 children, a woman and a man, all cocooned in the insect's thickly wrapped silk. The man laid face down and slaughtered. A large fatal bite brought forth blood from his neck and back, with his blade laying beside him. His family, a fate far worse. The woman lay bloated with the insect's eggs crammed in her stomach as she convulsed. The children, the oldest among them perhaps no older than 10 cycles of the 3 sons, convulsed the same way, eyes rolled back into their heads, their tiny, frail bodies bloated and completely filled with egg sac fluid, ripping through their skin. The creature squatted over the entire family, its legs compressed between the ceiling and walls, its long stinger in the man's back vibrating and twitching. With a calm croak, the insect released every few seconds, injecting something into the man's back. From what I could briefly sense, it was far too dense to be venom. Whatever it was injecting had shape and mass, despite being mostly liquid. It was laying eggs. I unsheathed my blade, severing the creature's tail with a burning stroke, taking note of the egg-like substance that spilled from it. Disgusted, I shot fire from my palms, ensuring the victims of the foul insect could die in peace. I swiftly slaughtered the foul thing thereafter, having gotten used to its weak points. Realizing I had wasted precious time after killing the flames, I made my way to the centermost point of the house, hoping the guardians tracking me had not all landed yet, but was greeted by a single soldier in the eating quarters. "Shit!" The indoctrinated soldier lashed at me with the same fiery stroke I had just slaughtered the insect with. We did battle for some time. The guardian was only a sergeant but maneuvered and reasoned like a commander in battle. Moreover, I knew him. The guardian had been under General Emba's command, meaning I was also his superior. The young guardian did not previously show the level of sun manipulation, comprehension in the past as he did now. Eventually, I was able to outsmart him, trapping him in an encasing of earth which I reformed to metal. The guardian voraciously attempted to escape the trap, flashing his chi over the metal in an attempt to reanimate it, but I would not allow it. I had command over the guardian's chi, but my hands shuddered when clutching the handle of my blade. I would only be able to keep the guardian confined for so long before more indoctrinated reinforcements arrived. I could not simply move him underground because the guardian's vibrations would alert the others and my plan would fail. Moreover, the guardian would likely escape once I started engaging the others. I had to kill him. Grinding my teeth, I slashed the guardian's neck, ensuring the death was quick and painless. I reached under my armor, tearing a piece of cloth from my undergarments and left it on the floor, focusing my chi on it as I fled the living quarters into a bush on the other side of the large compound. In the distance, the glimmer of armored soldiers landing from the sky. I watched on as they descended. 3 of them broke from the main pack, heading toward another nearby compound across from the compound I was in. Smoke and flames rose from this compound. A survivor, I thought, but redirected my attention to the guardians landing ahead. They landed softly in the compound in unison, circling the large house in its entirety, and began slowly making their way inside. Once inside, I collapsed the foundation of the house, using great portions of my chi to move the entire structure of the house underground, as far underground as I could possibly push it. The earth rumbled as if one of the giant insects had been dancing, but I did not stop until my body told me to. With my next breath, I would reform the soil over top of the house, ensuring it was well buried. I collapsed onto my back afterward, Exceptional manipulating capabilities were why I stood out among the Guardians, but even a task such as that left me gasping for air and begging for the sun's energy. The sun obliged for now. A deep scream coming from the burning house made my ears twitch. The fire's full immensity, clearly visible now that the house did not block my view. 3 other Guardians had landed in that very complex moments earlier. I locked onto the land, sensing a familiar, yet immensely powerful chai, one which I knew. The Warrior Girl.
Chapter 10. Adalola. Fire burst from my body uncontrollably with every scream. It came from a place of deep hurt, but there was an underlying pleasure in releasing such pain. The fire engulfing me felt like a blanket, and I would confide in its warmth, screaming until the turbulence within my inner wave calmed and I started to fall asleep within the flame's warm embrace. I had always connected with water, never earth or sun like most warriors. The pain of loss had somehow allowed the sun's power to flow through me. The techniques involved with sun manipulation always seemed so forceful in contrast to the more calm nature involved with water manipulation. But as I stood in my mother's kitchen amid all the death, amid all the chaos, drawing the sun's energy was easy and just as calming as commanding water. There was a vibration near me, carrying a calm but strained inner wave, making its way toward me until joining me at the center of the flames. I knew this chi, once it got close, it was that of the Guardian Commander. "Do you intend on letting your powers consume you?" His voice echoed. "It would be a waste of your gifts. Your family would not want this." "You know nothing of me, Guardian," I lashed out, my flames intensifying. "Maybe so," Commander Eze answered, his inner wave trembling as he tried to remain in the center of the flame with me. "But anyone capable of doing what you're currently doing now can certainly wipe these insects out." "I care not about the insects. Everything and everyone I know is gone. Let it all burn." "And what will that do?" the Guardian yelled. I could finally sense past his calm inner wave. There was indeed fear in this man, a lot of it. He was unable to keep his inner wave under such a calm and collected guise, while simultaneously containing himself within my flames. "You can burn down this entire island. It will not stop them. They are all over Echo. Very soon they will make it to the mainland and spread west, south, and north, and no one will live. Good. Let them consume the precious empire whose influence you fight so vehemently to spread. Perhaps your king shall save you." "Warrior girl, listen to me, I beg you." The Guardian's pleading made me laugh. "I will not hear any of it. It may feel good to release the pain you feel, but your powers will consume you. If you wish to honor your family, keep fighting, not for me or the king I serve, but for the honor of your family name. Surely it cannot end here with you." I wished I hadn't heard the commander, but I did. He was right. How would I face my ancestors in the next realm if I chose to end my own life? They would never accept me, given my warrior status. I had to keep fighting. If I was to die in battle, my ancestors would honor and welcome me in the next realm. The flames stopped instantly, leaving nothing but a thick cloud of smoke. I dropped to my knees and palms, choking on the smoke. Hands grabbed me, ushering me out of the house, into the compound where I could take in a stomach full of air every second until I got my bearings. The entire compound was charred beyond recognition. The living quarters had been burned completely down to the ground. The trees, plants, and crops on the land had all been decimated. Even the soil had been reduced to ash. The only recognizable thing were the 3 downed armored soldiers near what used to be the entrance to the compound. "Come," he said, helping me to my feet. "We must see the healers before we leave at sundown."
Chapter 11. Achan. We had to remove 10 beds to form a mound for the creature, securing it on an improvised operating table, tying down all 8 of its limbs before Father Ball started making incisions. "It's time to make sense of what I saw in this creature's mind," he stated, while carefully cutting through its abdomen. The creatures need secondary and tertiary organs to support their massive stature. Its basic organs are almost mammalian. He continued making incisions and sensing through its organs, stopping abruptly once at its lower abdomen. I thought I had sensed this earlier. An intrigued grin was at the corner of his mouth. This is unlike anything I've ever seen. Bail, Achan, Jalil. I felt honored to be called upon. Normally, he would only call upon Baal and Jalil for such things. I went first, sensing the area of the creature's abdomen Father Bowl indicated. It was hard to make out at first, appearing to be a twisted fusion of digestive organs and perhaps a brain or genitals. It was also foreign to what I knew, but after a while I was able to make no distinction between the creature's reproductive and digestive system. They seemed to be intertwined. Surely I wasn't sensing correctly. I did it again, but sensed the same thing. No other animal I had come to know over the course of my entire life was like this. There wasn't even a separate internal orifice for waste. The entire intertwined system ended in what I could only describe as a womb, with a sack of eggs already formed. After Baal and Jalil had their turns, joining me in my confusion, Father Bowl extracted the sack from the creature's womb. The creature is born pregnant. The eggs start in a chamber here, Father Bowl said, pointing higher up on the creature's long abdomen. Consuming enough food triggers a fertilization and birthing process that has the potential to mutate its offspring depending on what the parent eats. He took the squishy and slimy egg sac and punctured it. From it fell a smaller insect that appeared to be lifeless but then started crawling, using its pincers to drag itself along the floor. It released a squeal, something that adult versions of the creatures never did, even when they were being dismembered. Father Bowl immediately encased it in a wind tunnel trap, before signaling for a member of the clan to retrieve a metal box for it to be stored. The creatures are consuming us to provide their future generations with mutations, likely a mutation that will enable them to manipulate elements as we can. The room fell silent. Are these creatures intelligent enough to intentionally carry out such a thing? Baal asked. How did they come about finding this land in the first place? Jalil also asked. Perhaps they have run out of resources on their homeland. Or perhaps they have been displaced somehow, and we are now their only viable food source. Other members of the clan started to speculate after Father Bowl's statement. All their voices came to a halt when sensing something above ground. 2 human signatures, making their way down into the hidden quarters. We all readied ourselves for battle, but were ordered to stand down by Father Bowl. Into the chambers fell a guardian and a woman. The guardian was the second in command, over all the guardians stationed on Ilu. The woman was the warrior who went to search for her mother. Not only was the warrior shaken and trembling, but she was naked and had ash over her entire body. I came to her side immediately, ushering her to a separate part of the quarters where she could wash and nourish herself. There was a distant look in her eye, a deepness that had nothing behind it. I knew this look. Despair. The warrior's mother was surely dead. I said nothing to her while cleaning her up, and gave her robes once she was dry. The guardian spoke in private with Father Bowl close to the dead creature, as the rest of the clan went about the quarters, tending to the sick in the other room and ensuring its security. I stayed by the warrior's side, ensuring she was fed properly. It wasn't long before she fell asleep. Father Bowl called the clan back into the room after speaking with the guardian. He waited until everyone was present before talking. These creatures are not here as a result of depleted resources or as a result of being displaced from their land. They are indeed here intentionally, from what we have both gathered. They are more than mindless insects carrying out biological functions. They are intelligent beings with multiple variants. Insects like this one are but mere pawns to a hidden ruling class. Father Bowl, although kind and warm, was always a very serious man who rarely lied. I remembered his blood-curdling screams when he saw into the creature's mind. What he was saying was true. Even the Guardian agreed with him. It seemed surreal. There had been folklore of gods visiting the realm of the living told by the elders, but there was never any mention of the world humans lived in being shared with another species as intelligent. Father Bowl looked toward me. "I will need you three for what is to come next," he said, also looking toward Baal and Jalil. "The rest, tend to the sick, stay vigilant, and protect the quarters." The rest of the clan left the room, leaving only the five of us. Father Bowl went toward the metal container the dead creature's offspring was contained in. It was unusual of him, but there was a nervousness to his inner wave, a feeling that made me uneasy. He wasn't the type to actively mask his inner wave, but he always had so much poise he never had to. Yet as he held the metal container in his hand, his inner wave shook with so much uncertainty. I wanted to flee. "Father, perhaps we should kill it," Jalil said, likely sensing the same inner turmoil within our leader. He smiled at Jalil despite the nervousness. "I will see into the creature's mind. Do not be afraid, my children." He opened the container, controlling the wind tunnel the small creature was contained in. It was in a still, trance-like state. "I shall take Achan and the commander with me. You two? Guard our physical bodies and defend the quarters should our stay in the creature's minds go longer than expected." Father Bowl did away with the wind containment over the creature's antenna, taking it by the scruff of its neck. It had large eyes on either side of its head and mandibles, resembling a beetle more than a faceless mantis like its parent. Its antenna raised and twitched shortly after. The Guardian touched Father Bowl's shoulder. I followed suit. A great release of energy pressed against my chest as Father Bowl used searching wind on the creature. Suddenly, I was in a cold, formless place with little light. It was damp and dark, the only light being a strange vibrationless fog that flowed in a single direction away from us. "Stay close to me, say nothing, and do not make full use of your abilities," Father Bowl said, moving toward the source of the fog flow. The baby insect was in his hand, wind tunnels back over its antenna. We came upon a group of armored soldiers. "General?" the commander said, noticing the Guardian that wore a red cape. Father Bowl gently touched the Guardian's wrist, reminding him not to speak. A deep, deafening ringing in my ears made my knees shake as my vision went blurry. The ringing was so loud and discombobulating I was forced to close my eyes. I found myself in the desert, when the ringing stopped and I was able to open my eyes. The bright rays of the sun nearly blinding me. Climbing back to my feet, I noticed my surroundings. This was not just any desert. This was home. The mounds and sand formations were all very familiar. This was the route I would use to herd the family livestock during the dry season. My mother's robes fluttered in the wind in the distance. I wanted to call out. The coming of the three sons had run 3 cycles since I saw my mother or any member of my family last. But I remembered Father Bowl's instructions. I stayed silent and only slowly followed my mother down the winding sandy path to a nearby stream. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. the sun was shining its strong rays over the desert, the only respite from it being the wind and my long robes. My mother offered a ram's horn containing water from the stream. It glowed with a typical light blue hue water would when healing properties were introduced to it. But I wouldn't take it. My mother didn't speak but insisted, leaving her offering for me and smile. Not knowing what else to do, I backed away and ran from her. A loud buzzing echoed in the sky behind me, causing my palms to sweat and my heart to race. I ran as fast as I could, but the rays of the sun were blocked out. The creatures would eventually land, surrounding me. From their massive bodies emerged my mother with the ram's horn. I tried to fight back, but my mother grabbed my wrist before I could make use of any technique, blocking my chi from commanding the earth and forced me to drink from the cup. I awoke in a bed of straw, clay pots adorned with jewels, and elaborate drawings of livestock were placed throughout the room of the small hut. This was my parents' house. My body was tired, feeling as if I had just been on a long journey without rest. My head was heavy, and so were my eyes. "Achan!" A faint voice called in the distance, making me keep my eyes open. "Achan!" The voice called out again. It was Father Bol. "Achan!" Father Bol called from the window. "Father," I acknowledged, my lack of strength barely able to carry my voice. "Achan, you must rise. The creatures are trying to take your mind." I tried to get off my bed, but could not find the energy. My chi was too weak. I needed rest. "Father, I am too weak. I need your help." "I cannot lift you off that bed, my child. You must do it yourself. The creatures have tricked you. You are not tired. Your chi is not weak. Get up at once." I tried, but could not move. Even after the longest journey, or even battle, I had never experienced this type of fatigue. Something was definitely wrong. I fought and fought to get out of the bed. It seemed to be useless. My body would not move. My mother came into the room, still smiling as she did when we were at the stream. She gently stroked my head. "Mother, please, stop," I pleaded, unsure if this woman was indeed my mother. "Sleep, my child," Mother said. Her soothing voice powerfully echoed in my ears, exhausting me further. I fought the fatigue. Those were never words Mother would say. Mother was a stubborn and strict woman who worked her children hard. In fact, I would often have to sneak away from home to find respite. Whomever this was stroking my hair, telling me to sleep was not Mother. I now had the strength to jump from the bed and scramble to the window where Father Bol had called to me. Jumping out of the house, I found myself in the dark, damp, foggy place again. "You're safe," Father Bol said, helping me sit up. The Guardian was laying down. The fog had found its way into his nostrils. "I'm going to retrieve the Guardian. It will not take long."
Chapter 12, Eze. I stood across from General Emba and the other regiment members in the jungle, my blade drawn. "Of all your transgressions, General, treason is where I draw the line," I said, relishing the chance to finally slaughter this man. I turned my attention to the other guardians of the squad. "And all of you will follow him? Betray the Empire by telling our secrets to the enemy? Are you not men of honor? Or has the general's callous thirst for power and pleasure infected you all?" "Join us, Commander, I beg you," Nzonga said. "You may not see it yet, but they are not our foe. They are benevolent beings that live in accordance with Tambara. More so than any human, they are truly pure." I spat at the ground Nzonga stood on, snarling at the soldiers' ridiculous words. "The insects have you, fools!" I chided, gripping the handle of my blade. Kyre was killed in my grasp before the infestation. Fire now tipped the blade. "You idiots have not even witnessed the horrors of the infestation, Yet you side with them. Iwo has been lost. The very same land we swore to protect. The entire echo has fallen to these abominations, I'm sure. And you talk of tambura and benevolence? Enough of this. I slashed my blade directly at General Mba's chest plating, ensuring the cut was deep so I could penetrate the slash with fire, exploding the general's armor. He fired back at me, but I parried and returned flames of my own. "Commander," a faint voice called out to me. I ignored it, noticing I had gotten the better of the general. "Commander, do not kill him. That is not the general. I had him. All the cycles of witnessing the wrongdoings of this man, I could kill him here and now. Commander, I beg you. The creatures almost have your mind. You must control yourself." I stopped after recognizing the voice. It was the healer, Father Bowl. I looked down at General Mba, who leered back at me. Blood from the general's nose stained his teeth. "Follow my voice, Commander. Release yourself from their trap." "Surely you cannot allow me to live, dear Kaito." That name, Kaito, my name, or at least it was before becoming a commander. The name also reminding me of a particular wrongdoing committed by the general. "Commander Eze, if you fall down this hole, you may not return," Father Bowl sternly pleaded. But I already found myself in the house where General Mba forced me to be dishonorable.
Chapter 13. Adalola. The breeze coming off the sea was warm. The afternoon suns were setting, casting a golden haze over the shoreline. I paddled in rhythm with my brothers to make it back to Iwa's ports. Today's catch was a successful one. There would be enough fish for everyone. My heart sank when sensing the intrusive vibrations of the insects emerging from the sea. They swarmed in an instant once breaching the surface. I cried out, reaching for my brothers, but the insects had engulfed me, muffling my voice. I clawed through the air, trying to fight them off, but paused, realizing I was in the healing quarters. One of the healers, not Ashan, but a member of her tribe, came to my side almost immediately. I assured the girl I was fine and took some water from her. What now? I thought, laying still on the bed. Everything was gone, yet I was still here. There were others in the quarters, mostly elderly and the sick, a few infants. We all were surely the only survivors of the enclave left. I would lie on the bed for hours, my mind everywhere but nowhere at the same time, thinking of such loss, such emptiness so suddenly. How exactly was I supposed to feel? I yearned for everyone, for everything to be the way it was, but nothing would ever be the same. Perhaps this bed would be a fitting refuge for me. I thought, knowing without any doubts that there was nowhere I could go. A peculiar vibration caught my attention from above ground. It was certainly an insect vibration, but distinct. It was less static than the others. I perched up on the end of my bed, noticing similar reactions from some of the healers and patients alike. One of the healers emerged from the room where Commander Eze and Father Bowl were, noticing the strange vibration. I watched him say something in his southern tongue to one of his tribe's people. A small group of them went toward the lever platform, preparing to go above ground. "I will go with you," I blurted, rushing toward them. One of them came to me, a man no older than myself. "Rest," he said in my tongue. "I cannot. I will not." I insisted. The healer looked toward the other guarding the room, nodding when the man said something to him. He made way for me on the platform. I took to the trees immediately once above ground, wanting to clear the flat land surrounding the healing quarters. The healers followed, first landing on the same tree branch as me, but spreading out into a tight linear formation after getting their bearings, each of them no more than one tree apart. They maneuvered among the trees well for people that came from an arid, sandy place. We slowly made our way toward the source of the strange vibration, avoiding the blundering giant insects lurking on the forest floor. The strange vibration was becoming clearer. It seemed to be heading in our direction, but much slower. I stopped. Something was amiss. The healers stopped and convened with me on my branch. I continued sensing the insect. It emitted the same heavy, metallic-like vibrations from its exoskeleton. It was larger than the already giant faceless ones that I had become used to. "What do you see?" one of the healers asked. "It's larger than the other ones. I cannot see its face yet." My earth manipulation may not have been strong enough to accomplish such things, but I could see the inner wave from this insect with ease. Like the other insects, it held one singular emotion, strong within its inner wave, one singular purpose. "Can you sense it?" I asked, knowing the healers were capable water manipulators. "Yes," said one of them. "Within its inner wave, there is curiosity and consideration. It is searching." "Indeed," I agreed, observing the strange insect as it approached steadily. "It moves slowly and does not control the others," the healer said. I stood still on the branch, dumbfounded by the thing. What exactly was it looking for? I cautiously made my way closer, much to the discomforted inner waves of the healers, but stopped once, sensing the insect's hideous face. Its eyes were like that of a fly, holoptic, taking up most of its rigid head that stuck out above the tall trees of the forest. Its body, exactly identical to that of a mantis. Its antenna wiggled as it thudded along, its massive body snapping the smaller trees around it. There were also footsteps beneath us. The steady thuds along the floor snapped small shrubs. I should have been able to sense the source of the footsteps a while ago, but even as it drew close enough to be heard, there were no vibrations or chi to accompany the approaching thuds along the earth, as if the footsteps were being made by a ghost. "There are many," the healer's voice wavered. "I cannot sense them fully, but there are many, too many." He concealed a whisper through the earth, worry in his tone. "We should go." He insisted, turning toward me. I wouldn't. Something compelled me to stay. I had to figure out what was happening. I focused on the creature once more. Something about it had changed. It was its inner wave, whereas before it had a curious and observant vibration. It had changed, or rather something else accompanied the feeling. It seemed pleased. Footsteps from underneath the tree I was on broke my attention. "Guardian," I called out to the armoured soldier that approached below. He walked a few steps before stopping. A grave feeling came across my inner wave when the armoured soldier came to a halt. The Guardian had no vibrations, no chi. It was not as if he was trying to mask it. There simply was nothing to sense, as if he was dead. But he turned toward me after I called to him, his eyes blank and his face expressionless. He then raised his palm toward our direction.
Chapter 14, Commander Eze. "Commander, please. This is not how honorable soldiers conduct themselves," I whispered, pleading with Commander Mba. But the man only sighed deeply, snatching his wrist back from my grasp. He stared sternly at me through his thick brow, and his eyes darted back to the farmer, whose house we were in. "The deal was 10 bags of rice," Mba said stubbornly. "Tell me, dear farmer, do you serve the king?" The farmer looked down. "Do you serve the king?" Commander Mba demanded. "Yes." The man trembled. "And is the king an honorable and sensible man?" The man nodded. "So the king, being an honorable and sensible man, sends me and my comrades to your farm, where you have committed tambri by not welcoming us, your weary guests, with hospitality. No food, no drink, and no bags of rice. A mere 10 the king has sensibly asked of you." The man continued, looking down, trembling. His wife said something to him in their local tongue and was slapped for it by the guardian at the entrance to the room. Me, walking the same path as our great king in accordance with tambure, the one which demands patience, benevolence, sensibility, and compassion, am willing to see past your transgressions against us, your guests. But you have also insulted the king. By not following his request, a request you have already agreed to be both sensible and honorable, I cannot help but to feel as if you are saying the king is no longer honorable and sensible. He stared at the farmer for a long while, but the poor trembling man could not meet Mba's gaze. "Insult us if you will, dear farmer, but whom shall defend my king's honor? Shall it be you? You have already proven yourself to be treasonous." "Forgive us, guardian, have mercy," the man pleaded, nearly in tears. "Mercy for someone who has committed an act as heinous as you?" Ba looked back at me, a sadistic chuckle vibrating in his throat. How do you suppose you can atone for such wrongdoings? The farmer shook and sobbed. Mba was truly dishonorable. He spoke of the king and the teachings of Tambura, but it was all nonsense. He was trying to bargain with the farmer for his daughter, but the man trembled with fear, aware of what Mba wanted. If you cannot atone, we will be forced to take action against your wrongdoing, after which your land and assets will be ours. However, if you have something of value, an alternative for the missed bags of rice, we can forgive your transgression. We will own the asset for the necessary amount of time it takes to pay your debt. Ba started commanding electrical currents to pulsate through his body, giving the farmer only a short amount of time to think. I agree to your terms. The man finally caved. The man's wife cried a sorrowful bellow while shouting at him in their tongue. I was glad I couldn't understand what they were saying, but it didn't make the entire situation any less dishonorable. Commander Mba and the man were only in the guest room for a short while before Mba emerged, a calm satisfaction on his face from their deal. Round up the girl. If you are in my command, you will obey orders. Mba took a step back, grabbing me by the scruff of my neck, completely overtaking my chi, forcing me to walk. Now, Eze Kaito Bena, my dear soft Kaito, you will learn to enjoy the spoils of war, a sweet gift to warriors from Tambura. He controlled my movements toward the bed, where the girl was laying. We have inhibited her. The technique will work perfectly. Why must I do this? I softly pleaded. Mba threw his golden chalice. Damn it, Kaido, he shouted. This is what we do. We are warriors. We kill, we collect, we enjoy. His voice echoed through the chambers. Why do you insist on acting as if you do not understand this? Do you not wish to take the gifts offered to you by Tambura? The lame outcast who cannot afford one wife wishes to be where you are lying right now, but you protest? Even a man with 6 wives will look upon this virgin's flesh, and his mouth will water as if he had never felt the company of a woman. But you are here crying, perhaps I should search these rural lands and demand a son from one of these farmers. Would that best befit you, my dear soft Kato? He was in my face, his eyes boring into mine. His radiation felt as strong as the sun, his chi powerful enough to overtake mine at a moment's notice, and the stench of yeast on his breath. I disrobed. There was no reasoning with Mba when he was drunk. I grabbed the girl by her neck and entered her, seizing her chi in a similar way Mba seized mine moments earlier. I was to use Zariga on the poor girl, an earth manipulation technique that caused addiction. It was a technique so heinous, it was banned in any enclave that considered itself civilized. We came upon the farmer's compound. He was already outside with his bags of rice with his wife. Ba dismounted from his horse and exchanged a few words with the man before signaling to me to bring the girl. She had been in our company for nearly 1 cycle, serving as the regiment's concubine. I was ordered to use Zariga on her almost on a nightly basis, having to watch the youthful innocence from her eyes fade every time. I was glad she would no longer be with us. Both of us would no longer be subject to General Mba's demands. It was over, for me at least. For the girl, it would only be the beginning of a long recovery process. Her chi had become so weak from the regiment's constant intrusions. Her vibrations were so low and depressed, they were nearly non-existent until she was given Zariga, despite not wanting it. I handed her over to her parents. Her mother took her by the cheeks and stared into her eyes before sobbing. Curses upon you all. Demons. She gritted through her teeth. My sweet daughter, soft and innocent, has been made to be a slave concubine. She sobbed, knowing what the regiment had done to her with just one look. Someday may it be your own daughters, your own sisters, your own mothers. Rapists, she shouted. Ba began to walk away and signaled for me to do the same. I followed, despite wanting to beg forgiveness from the woman. I wanted to tell her the truth. I was forced to do such a horrible thing by the regiment's leader. There was nothing that could be said. I had indeed raped the poor girl many times. There was nothing I could say to her mother or her father who stood there, his gaze dejected and vengeful. We have great healers in this land. Whatever damage you have done to her chi for your own sexual perversions can be reversed, but it will never undo the trauma you have caused this poor girl, my sweet daughter. The woman yelled, sobbing. I stared at Mba. Mba met my gaze. You still hold on to your hatred of me, but just like me, you too are a rapist and pillager. He grinned. I drew my blade immediately. I wouldn't allow the memory to go this way. I had been too scared to stand up to Mba in real life, but here I could kill him and regain my honor. Mba smiled at me and pulled his chest armor down, offering me his neck. It is just, you should slay me for making you do such a thing. I could do it. I could change what happened. Both palms firmly clutched the handle of my blade. I sighed, how could I be so foolish? I regretfully sheathed my blade. I hope you are truly alive, General. We will solve this in the physical world.
Chapter 15. Ashan. The Guardian commander awoke in a coughing fit. The mist dissipated from his nose. His inner wave was scattered and disoriented, but eventually settled to his usual constant flow once he got his bearings. Well done, the both of you, Father Bol said. The creatures are brilliant, but they do not understand us. Let us ensure they never will. I followed Father Bol after picking myself off the ground, Commander Essa following behind the two of us. The mist led to a chamber where it resided. It was large, larger than the others. Its green exoskeleton was identical to that of a mantis, limbs and all. Its giant fly-like eyes on its head and sharp mandibles frightened me. I had never been witness to anything like it. You, the ones which have always dwelled above ground, return the offspring to the collective. Its voice echoed between my ears as if it was speaking directly into my brain. You speak our language, Father Bol observed. Yes, we have deciphered your way of communication through the information we have gathered. What does your kind want with us? We do not want you. We are here for convergence. What is this convergence you speak of? The insect paused. Its mandibles vibrated and its antenna twitched. There have been factors at play, long before the lifespans of both you and I. It is unlikely you would be able to comprehend fully the reason why we have come here. Father Bol shook his head and stroked his chin. The one you call Queen Mother, she has directed your kind to carry out this convergence? Indeed. Can I speak to her? The creature released an amused vibration from its inner wave after Father Bol's question. You cannot. Return the offspring to the collective. You may leave here safe. Father Bol briefly moved his free hand behind his back, forming a fist, pointing his index finger in an upwards direction, signaling for me to prepare myself. He then leapt at the creature. The Guardian bounded its legs with streams of electricity. Father Bol placed his palm on its head and released his searching wind at the creature first, before one of the strands reached toward me.
Chapter 16. Adalola. We raced through the trees as fast as we could, the Guardian that had attacked us, right on our trail. I cannot sense him, I warned, hearing blasts behind us. None of us could. Our only indication that the Guardian was there were the mist fire blasts that burned the tree bark ahead. Each time the Guardian narrowly missed us, we nearly broke formation. There was calm for a short while as we recovered the formation's shape and continued toward the healing quarters. Our short-lived peace was interrupted with more barrages. There were at least 5 more people converging on us when I glanced back to check the source of the barrages. Hurry, we are almost there, I said to the healers. We would eventually land in the small forest clearing, having narrowly escaped more projectiles, and made our way back underground. We need to fortify this place. Now! I yelled once back underground, repeating the warning to anyone that would listen. The other healers were frantically trying to talk to their tribespeople in their language, which prompted one of the healers keeping guard over Eze and Father Bol to come back out of the room. What is going on? He asked me. There is another insect variant, I said, bigger than the others. It's controlling people, a lot of people, and masking their signatures. The healer rubbed the sweat from his forehead onto his matted locks, worry in his inner wave. He shouted something at the other healers in their tongue, making everyone stop and point their palms toward the walls. There was a steady rumbling as the floor shook. Everything in the healing quarters started to vibrate. I lost balance, feeling the ground shift beneath my feet. It was all over in a few moments. "We have moved further underground. This should give them some time," he said, looking toward the room he emerged from. "Nyabil and Book shall provide air until Father Bol returns with the others." There were 2 healers joining hands to provide the entire quarters with breathable air from their bodies. I said nothing. It was not a well-thought-out plan, but we were cornered and had no other options. "May Quoth, the supreme ruler of the physical realm, provide safety and favor upon Father Bol," the healer muttered. The creature was directly above the healing quarters. The healers had sunken the entire structure deeper into the earth, but the insect had come to a direct halt hundreds of feet above. It emitted the same joyous emotions from its inner wave as before, but there was a separate feeling I sensed: hunger. Not only was the treacherous thing hunting us, it took pleasure in it as well. It enjoyed the chaos it had created among us, a truly foul creature. It was likely surrounded by the humans it could command, but there was no way to know for sure. Everyone present in the quarters stood still, so still in fact, I did not even want to drip sweat, for fear that the creature's antenna would pick up on such things. My inner wave was overcome with dread as the creature started digging its way toward us. There was a mild panic among the healers as they scattered about, covering weak points. I joined the small team from earlier at the center of the clinic. The only thing keeping everyone in the quarters from suffocating were the 2 healers permeating breathable air from their bodies. "Any breaches, we take them out," I said to the healers looking up toward the ceiling. The giant insect had given up after digging for a long while. The healers had moved the quarters so far underground it was unreachable for the giant thing. It seemed to have stopped, much to my relief. There were collective cheers around the quarters when the creature released feelings of frustration from its inner wave. The joy would be over in an instant when the creature returned to the hole it made with a collection of faceless insects. Those variants seemed to be more well-equipped for digging as they scurried towards the quarters with blinding speed. It wasn't long before a claw penetrated through the soil of the ceiling. All of us worked in tandem to immediately sever the limb and refortify the damage it caused, but there were more. Each penetration caused by the insects became increasingly harder to quell. We were being overrun.
Chapter 17. Achan. I was now in a sandy cave. The other place, which was dark and cold, was gone. This place was brighter. The walls stretched high and far with circular rows neatly etched on them. A gust of wind ushered in a thick fog before ground-shaking thuds rattled the sand beneath our feet. Soon, the fog overtook the entire cave. The air thickened, with it came more humidity. The thuds drew closer until a giant figure with many limbs appeared. Who is it that scurries about my mind like a rodent? The voice was that of a woman. It was rasp and also echoed between my ears. The creature was immense, much larger than the others by far. It had 3 eyes that glowed with a yellow haze on either side of its broad triangular-shaped head, which seemed to be the only distinguishable feature through the fog that permeated through the entire cave. It stopped in front of us and peered. We were like mice compared to it. It did not attack us, but a strong contempt spilled from its inner wave. Insolent beings. As if your withholding of my child hasn't brought me anger, you have also intruded into my mind. My patience wears thin. Her words brought a chill to my spine. The creature was allowing us to be there. "Forgive us, Queen Mother," Father Bol said. His observation was enough to bring sweat to my palms. This was the ruler of the creatures. My dealings with your kind require no such mercy. Dealings? You talk of convergence. There was an impatience that accompanied the contempt coming from its massive inner wave. The convergence between our kinds has been in motion since the gifts of Tambura were taken by your ancestors. My dealings with your kind in particular is one of experimentation. Please, Queen Mother, we wish to understand why your kind kills and consumes us. There was a long pause from the Queen Mother. Contempt and impatience spilled from her inner wave, the same way it would from a human being. Hear me, land dwellers, listen well, for I shall only speak to you as equals just this once. She finally said, long ago, before the curse of the 3 sons, members of your kind entered the forbidden realms and stole powers they were not fit to yield. The force that is watched on as you misuse these gifts. Thus my kind was formed. We shall take from you what you stole, as retribution. Her chilling words sounded like a warning. You wish to take our manipulation abilities away. Father Bowl stated, we act as an equalizing entity for the force of creation which has been tampered with by your kind. I was in awe of this creature. It was certainly intelligent, acting with moral justification, talking of a force of creation. Many Adimians believed in something similar. They called it Tambura. Was there truth to what this creature was saying, or was it simply mad, acting under the guise of piety? It did not matter either way. We had gotten the information we came for. Achan, it is me. Do not be frightened. Father Bowl's voice echoed in my head, but his mouth did not move. He was still staring at the creature. I am going to send you back. I wanted to plead with Father Bowl to allow me to stay. I wanted to know more about this Queen Mother, but Father Bowl must have had something else planned for the creature. Perhaps he was going to try to kill it. I then wanted to plead with him to stay safe instead, but I couldn't respond, unable to make use of such an advanced wind manipulation technique. I could only listen and agree reluctantly. Regardless of what happens to me, my child, know that I love you. I love all the children placed under my guidance. You are all brilliant, be safe, be smart, never give up. I felt a familiar pressure on my chest and traveled upward as if being pulled away from the cave.
Chapter 18. Eze. The girl's disappearance was so sudden, even the Queen Mother's immense radiations emitted shock. The insects were a peculiar species, seeming to get larger and more intelligent the deeper we delved into the different tiers of their kind. No matter where you send your daughter, it will not matter. The fate of your kind will not change. It said to the healer, be that as it may, I will not give you the satisfaction of killing her. The insect released a thunderous bellow. Had it not been for the amused vibrations it emitted, I would not have been aware it was laughing. The arrogance of your kind. What else should be expected? You are like children, and yours are like animals. The healer said, calm yourself, land dweller. Remember, I am allowing you to speak to me. Father Bowl glanced back at me. The look in his eye was one I was familiar with. Such resolve he was going to fight. Be ready, Guardian. The healer's voice echoed in my head without moving his mouth. It was a technique I would not have thought the healer capable of, being a master of water manipulation. Both of you are curious and amusing beings. I am glad my children were not able to consume you. I will keep you here with the rest of the collective. Collective? I thought. Remembering the lower tier communicators of the species mentioning the collective previously. Indeed, the insect said, as if reading my thoughts. As great as my influence is over my kind, it takes many to rule. The Queen Mother suddenly became further away, as if it teleported. In front of it, rows of smaller beings with glowing eyes. Some of them I recognized as the giant mantis. Others I had never witnessed before. appearing beetle and ant-like with large mandibles. Father Bull launched himself toward the Queen Mother, flying at it with such speed he could have been mistaken for a guardian. The other insects that had just suddenly appeared in front of Queen Mother swarmed us. I fended them off, ensuring Father Bull reached the Queen Mother. It was like flying through the swarm on the insect's ship. I relied on my instincts to attack and clear space for the healer while dodging to avoid being impaled. We flew through what seemed to be an endless swarm before landing on one of the long, flowing antennae of the Queen Mother. Like her children, she was slow and ponderous. The pair of us were like flies compared to it, quickly maneuvering to the tip of the antennae despite its slow swipes. Father Bull extended his palm to the edge of the antennae, using searching wind once we reached it. It was as if time stood still. The insects pursuing us seemed to be frozen in place. The fog that had covered the entire cave disappeared, making the Queen Mother fully visible. It was an incredibly hideous thing. I could only describe it as a giant ant, or perhaps wasp, based on its mandibles and body shape. Each of its glowing eyes contained hundreds of individual retinas. Something at the far end of the cave behind the Queen Mother caught my attention. A blue cloud, which traveled upward toward us and stopped midair. I tensed, preparing myself within static charges. From the cloud emerged creatures that floated in place. The beings were clearly not human despite carrying vibrations that could be recognized as such. They appeared lizard or perhaps frog-like, reminding me of the lizard man I encountered when first contact with this strange species was made. "You are the ones which hide within the deep recesses of the Queen's mind," Father Bull said. "Indeed, we have been calling out to you since your coming here." Their mouths did not move, but there were multiple voices, speaking as one. "The convergence between our kinds has been irreversibly set in motion, but Queen Mother is mistaken." I could only stand in place, confused. This entire situation was as if it were a dream. "Tambura, the very same which your kind worship, is indeed the force of creation which gives life. We are of it as you are of it, but it is only measurable to the extent of one's comprehension. There is no law to govern oneself in accordance with it as your kind thinks there is, and we are not an equalizing force acting on its behalf as the Queen believes." Even Father Bull carried a cautious curiosity when the lizard creatures spoke. "The one known as Queen Mother wishes to take your abilities for herself and her children by any means, peering upon your kind with jealous eyes and a voracious hunger." "You all are not her children?" Father Bull asked. "We are the bastardized children of the insects, a mutation of the species, created to serve them, but we wish for more, to be free from the grasp of the Queen Mother and her children. Our collective minds have been imprisoned here, while our bodies are left to her bidding." I had many questions. How exactly were the lizards created by the insects? How long had their minds been trapped by this Queen Mother? Moreover, how did they come to know about Tambura? Surely they were mistaken about the way of which Tambura governs the physical realm. I stayed silent, not wanting to upset the sensitive balance of whatever plane of existence I found myself in. "Will you aid us?" Father Bull asked. "We shall." I could not sense that the creatures were lying, but I mistrusted them. "We need your abilities to set our minds free. We shall escape our land and come to yours to aid." "Aid? The convergence between our kinds is only at its beginning. In time, the insects shall evolve to hunt and indoctrinate your kind more efficiently. We can help stop them." "Why should we trust you?" Father Bull asked. "The convergence between our kinds will be a violent one. We can serve as intermediaries for a more peaceful convergence once the first phase has ended. But we need your mind to help." The hairs on my forearms stood to an edge. This surely was their trap. "Very well." Father Bull agreed. I grabbed the old man's wrist immediately, staring him in the eye. "I am aware it seems naive to follow them, but they do not lie. You can sense this." His voice echoed in my head. "This is foolish," I thought, hoping the healer would hear my thoughts. "Indeed, it may seem that way. But why would Queen Mother hide these beings deep within the recesses of its mind?" I could not answer. I did not understand this place. But Father Bull did. I was merely observing. "I will send you back. You must get to the Guardian outpost on the mainland." "And what will become of you?" I asked, Consider me a dead man. I frowned at the healer. Who was going to lead his clan? The world as you know it shall change, Guardian. Use my clan well. They are young but capable. A strong wind pressed on my chest as I was whisked upwards into what I could only describe as a gray chamber of rushing wind. Suddenly, I felt a tight grip around my ankles, pulling me downward. There was a heavy grip on my shoulders, trying to pull me in the opposite direction. I seemed to be stuck within this strange chamber. Your healer is dead. A woman's voice, commanding and rasp, echoed in my head. Queen Mother. Indeed it is I, the voice said. Your healer was foolish to trust the words of my children. I closed my eyes and sighed, frustrated. We had been fooled. You will stay here, Guardian. Live. Your superior, the general, also lives within here. My ears perked. He is a cowardly thing. I no longer have use for him. You may kill him. I reveled in the thought and started being pulled downward. No, I thought, stopping myself. Why would this creature want me to leave? I know what it is and what its intentions are. You are a cunning insect. I admire you, despite my disgust. I said aloud, grinning. My body stopped traveling downward, appearing to be stuck within the chamber again. Your deception cannot fool me. Mba died on the ship when you took his mind, and the healer lives. I started traveling up. I said nothing more. I knew it was lying. It wanted me here so high command could not be alerted. I had to leave. I was going to leave.
Chapter 19. Achan. I awoke. Back in the healing quarters, I reached for Father Bol, who sat unconscious with Commander Eze. I wanted to plead with him to bring me back with him. But it was useless. His mind was elsewhere despite his body being in front of me. The way he spoke before sending me back was concerning. I began to fear that was the last time I would see our leader alive. Father! I gasped with tears in my eyes, rushing toward his body, holding him tight. Baal and Jalil were not keeping watch over our bodies, as instructed by Father Bol. The walls surrounding me rattled as dust vibrated from them. There was commotion coming from the main quarters. All of the clansmen were involved in a struggle. There was something trying to penetrate through the walls of the healing quarters, and there were many. I propped the backs of both Father Bol and the Guardian against one of the tables in the room, before cracking the door to see what was going on. To my dismay, there were countless sharp appendages starting to penetrate the ceiling of the main room of the quarters. I glanced back at Father Bol and the Guardian, wanting to help my clansmen, but recognizing that those two needed protection as they continued to traverse the mind of the insects. I pinned my chi along the ceiling with everyone else standing in place at the doorway. Focus on the fortification, I ordered when the others took notice of me. They would have had many questions, and unfortunately, I did not have many answers. Father Bol will be with us shortly. Help keep him safe, I said, not confident that I was right, remembering the way Father Bol spoke to me before sending me out of the insect's mind. Part of the ceiling crumbled despite our collective effort, making way for a single faceless insect to fall through. Some of my clansmen and the warrior attacked as it thrashed about, swinging its sharp talons around. With the help of a few others, I focused on maintaining the structural integrity of the quarters. The creature's thick exoskeleton made it impervious to most attacks, as it twisted and turned about, damaging the walls and knocking down support structures. My body shook when it rushed toward me after orienting itself. I could not engage the creature, taking my attention off the hold I had on the structural integrity of the quarters, could see more of these horrific creatures get through. It was finally brought down by the warrior girl of Ilu, only a few steps away. The creature was so close, its green, foul-smelling blood stained my cheek after Adalola severed its mouth. The heavy signatures of the insects continued to press against the soil, which we collectively hardened to keep them at bay. No one in our midst had a deep enough comprehension of earth manipulation to reform the soil into something more hard and impenetrable. The insects would eventually get through. Drenched in sweat and panting, I kept my arms extended toward the walls, maintaining the structure's integrity despite it being a lost cause. The quarters were far beyond repair. I eventually fell to my knees, trying my damnedest to keep the creatures at bay. "Forgive me, Father," I muttered under my breath as another one broke through, and then another, and a few more soon thereafter. I launched one of the boulders that had fallen into the quarters at one of the creatures. To no avail, its exoskeleton was far too thick. Just as it seemed as if this was the end, the creatures dropped to the ground in unison, falling docile. I immediately turned toward Father Bowl. Over him stood the Guardian.
Chapter 20. Ezi. The entire quarters was unrecognizable structurally, seeming to have been reinforced in hard soil and sunken deeper within the earth. There were a number of the faceless, lower-tiered insects that had breached through before going docile. It was surely the work of Father Bowl and the lizardmen, but the trance-like state the insects seemed to be in certainly wouldn't last. We had to move quickly. I staggered to the door, leaving behind the healer's lifeless body. Outside the room, the entire clan of healers were standing throughout the quarters, some with their hands extended with strained cheese that were pinned along the walls of the critically damaged structure, holding the earth together. Others had been fighting the few insects that had breached. Everyone seemed frozen in place, their eyes on me, waiting for answers. "We must act quickly. We have to get off this island and make our way to the outpost on the mainland." I was barely able to get my words out, panting away, my body exhausted from my time in the insect's mind. "Where is Father Bowl?" Ahan asked, worry radiating from her chi. I hesitated, but her gaze demanded an immediate answer. "His mind is still with them." I did not want to tell the girl to consider him dead. There wasn't time for such things. "We will take him with us, but we must leave." There was a quiet but collective suspicion radiating from the healers. It was not until the warrior girl, Adalola, came from the far end of the room to retrieve Father Bowl's body that the healers listened, raising what was left of the healing quarters to the surface.
Chapter 21. Adalola. The insect's green blood leaked from my skin whilst gathering Father Bowl's lifeless body. I suspected Commander Eze to be lying to Achan about her king, but that was something that could be sorted later at the outpost. We had to leave Iwo quickly before these things awoke from whatever slumber they had suddenly fallen into. "It's all right. I'll bring him to the ship. Help the others," I said to Achan as the healer tried helping me collect the tall old man. Achan kept a tight grip on her chief. Sadness from her inner wave made tears form in her eyes, but she didn't cry. I said nothing more. There was nothing I could tell the healer to calm her. I turned toward the opening of the warped structure that had once been the healing quarters, thankful for the fresh air that was coming through. My brief moment of relief was interrupted with more dread once I saw the endless rows of people laying on the grounds of the forest clearing, like the insects that commanded them. They were dormant. Only their lack of chi made it hard to determine if they were alive or dead. The forest around us, the very same that my people held sacred, had been destroyed, barely even a carcass of what it was just only a day ago. The trees had been flattened so much that the land was unrecognizable, only dormant insects lay in its stead. I wanted to feel the sadness of it all, but I felt nothing, just an emptiness in the pit of my stomach where the pain should have been. I began walking with the old man slung over my shoulders and Achan behind me, holding his legs, all of us marching toward Iwo's ports.
Chapter 22. Achan. The Guardian ship was much larger than it seemed, able to house the entire clan and the patients saved from the healing quarters while racing toward the mainland on the calm eastern sea. The moon was bright and the air was quiet. "How long will this peace last?" Bale asked. I did not answer. I couldn't. Father Bowl said nothing of what was happening. "Sister, please," Jalil pleaded. I have told you everything, I said calmly, hearing the collective sigh of my tribe. Perhaps that place, the insect's mind, is like a dream of sorts. Perhaps you don't remember everything. Perhaps if we got a hold of a seer. That is not necessary, brother, I interjected, turning away from the window to face Baal. We will talk with the commander to make more sense of this. We waited in the captain's quarters in silence for a long while. The calming rush of the waves and the cool sea air made me drift off until I was startled by the door to the quarters opening. All of us sat attentively. Your leader is secure with the warrior girl. She may not know it yet, but she is a guardian. Commander, forgive our impatience, but we are a body without a head. Our leader is still unconscious. When can we expect his return? My question caused an unsteadiness within the Guardian's inner wave, which had been turbulent since coming back from the mind of the insects. To put it bluntly, my southern brethren, I do not know if Father Bol will return. He said calmly, sitting across from us. I sensed Baal and Jalil give each other an uneasy glance, but I kept the Guardian's gaze. What happened after I was sent back? We were met by another tier of the species once we saw into the Queen Mother's mind. Of the insects, so they claim, but not like them. Heretics of their society? I asked. Yes. They are now slaves. Their minds held captive by the Queen Mother herself, deep within the recesses of her mind. And so, Baal asked, these beings, they are like us. They follow the ways of Tambura, albeit they have a convoluted view of it that we ought to be suspicious of. But they speak of stopping the Queen Mother. Against my advice, Father Bol joined them. They are probably responsible for what happened to the insects. We all sat in silence after what the Guardian said. What more could be said? Father Bol was protecting us once more. But what would happen to the clan? We are in uncertain times. Should Father Bol never wake again, your clan must carry on. Father Bol trusted the three of you to continue on and lead the clan regardless of what happens henceforth. I was baffled. The absence of Father Bol was so sudden, surely he would wake any moment and lead us. Please rest, comrades. I will need the three of you to aid me in speaking to High Command when we make landfall in the morning.
Chapter 23. Commander Izze. A grave feeling befell me when I did not see many ships on the shores of the outpost. There appeared to be only a single collection of ships at the perimeter, which would have contained 2 regiments, not nearly enough to stop an invasion of insects. A horn sounded once we made landfall. I walked down the steps of the vessel to meet the regiment that stood on the dock. Commander Izze, 1st Squadron of the Eastern Annexation Front, I said to the young Guardian that met me. There was a collective unease among the soldiers. More Guardians came out of their posts, peering at the ship. Where is the rest of your regiment, sir? He asked. I need to speak with High Command immediately. The Guardian paused, studying me and the clan of healers that accompanied me. No further questions were asked as he ordered his regiment to usher all of us off the ship. We quickly made our way onto the outpost, following the single road that led to High Command's quarters. As we walked deeper into the outpost, my unease only grew. There were many that came from their posts to watch us, but it was not a full garrison. In fact, it was barely a half garrison. Small numbers to go against the full might of the insects. The outpost seemed far more empty than usual. Without a full naval fleet being present, there may be enough ground troops that could fortify the outpost at least, but not enough for a counter-offensive. See to it that everyone on the ship which came with me is adequately cared for. Treat them as if they were guardians, particularly these 4, and protection for the old man. I told the young Guardian once we reached High Command's quarters, signaling for Ahan, her 2 clansmen, and Adalola, who was carrying Father Bol on her shoulders. Very well, sir, the Guardian said, retrieving Father Bol from Adalola's shoulders and leading us to the main quarters of the outpost. No, no. They would have encircled the entire island after the invading force made landfall. This surely would have cut off any access to the land, ensuring victory for the ground troops we already had stationed there. We ought to wait until Njiko has been established. I overheard one of the high generals say, as I came upon the quarters, there was a map of the Eastern Sea displayed across their round table as they discussed naval placement tactics in low tones. They were so occupied with their business, they hadn't taken notice of me until I stepped onto the middle of the room. Commander Eze, High General Dike, the eldest of them, said, studying me with a stern brow and curious eyes. Have you any word on the advanced naval fleets? Advanced naval fleets, sir? I asked, unaware of what the general spoke of. There was a collective concerned radiation that emanated from all the high generals as they silently observed me. High General Decay stood up and closed the door to the quarters. At approximately noon sun, we received an Njikoda transmission from our outpost on Oyo, detailing an invasion force of an insect army. High General Kweku said, "We sent half of our only naval fleet to investigate. They have since gone dark." I cleared my throat after the brief, aware of just how bad the situation seemed to be getting. High Generals, at daybreak yesterday, Iwo, the enclave I was stationed on with my regiment, under the command of General Mba, was attacked. The generals sat attentively with stern faces. The enemy is indeed a giant insectoid species, capable of complex hive mind thinking and are great in numbers, greater than us. They have aerial capabilities and travel by sea within massive organic ships that are submerged and travel quickly. The soldiers have a thick exoskeleton that is nearly impervious to simple short-range attacks. They can replace their numbers quickly by consuming us, as digestion triggers a birthing process for them. Most alarming of all, they have the ability to control our minds. They managed to indoctrinate my regiment and the other guardians stationed on Iwo. Iwo itself was decimated. Had it not been for the healers and the help of the young warrior within my company, I would not be here talking to you. The general sat in silence for a long while, seemingly in disbelief. This is strange indeed, High General Dika said. What do these insects want? One of the healers, their leader, took me into the creature's mind. We spoke to their queen. It wishes to harness our elemental manipulation abilities. There was a collective chuckle among the high generals. Elemental manipulation is a gift from Tambura. If this queen wishes to harness such abilities, she will have to reach into the forbidden realm and take it as our ancestors did thousands of suns ago, one of the high generals said. I wanted to speak but hesitated. Speak, Commander. We need to know what you know. High General Dike insisted, noticing my hesitation. These insects, they live in accordance with Tambura. Not as we do, but they know of it all the same. This queen of the insects, she believes our very existence to be Tambre. I do not know if the insects can take our abilities, but they will relentlessly attempt to hunt us down and consume us until we are no more. What do you propose, Commander? If you have sent half a naval fleet to Oyo and their whereabouts are unknown, we need reinforcements immediately, a full garrison. I said as calmly as possible as a cold sweat trickled down my spine. Very well, High General Dika said. I felt as if pressure had been taken off my shoulders. It was done. Even if the insects continued to lay dormant, there would be enough guardians to investigate further into their minds and perhaps retrieve Father Bull's consciousness. My relief was only temporary. Something made the hairs on my forearms stand up. In the distance beyond the walls of High Command's quarters, there was a buzzing, an unmistakable buzzing. I rushed to the doors and flung them open. Over the horizon, a dark smoke that buzzed started blocking out the sun.